to take the music out. It always makes me sad.
Hopefully your air quality isn't being affected today.
Gosh. Not only is it pretty warm, but also a little smoky. Welcome in, friends. Welcome in, Triobium. And shout out to POBenergy already. I didn't realize you were already a Twitch user as well. Perfect. That just makes everything easier, right? Hey, Danielle. Thanks for the help today. Thanks for being here.
Hey.
So, it is another episode of Synth Friends. And I could say that about everything, but we feel really excited about this because the origins of Synth Friends was to have somebody new that we have never met before hang out with us on stream and kind of like see what we can vibe on. Understanding that we already kind of have a baseline of synth friendship or synth love.
Synth friendship.
Hey, synth love, good to see you. And then from there, that person would recommend someone else that we don't know to hang out with. And like it created this, well, now it's a web. Now it's a quantum field of synth friends instead of a Kevin Bacon game, which is how it started. But I think we could play
I love that.
If we played the Kevin Bacon game with Patrick, it would take about 2 seconds.
Right.
So, the fact that almost all the synth friends that we've had on,
like Kevin Bacon is his roommate,
have recommended that we have Patrick on. It's crazy. So, and it's finally happening. The stars have aligned, and Patrick was able to join us today, and it's really good timing because there's a lot of really cool stuff that he has going on that we're going to get to talk about. So I think we're gonna jump back into that Zoom. I Am Lab is that friend. Absolutely. Synth Lab friend, we'll say. And then we will get Patrick on and we can have our chat and hang and learn more about his
the
synth
POB
connections. It's like the rainbow connection. All right, let me get our stuff working. And then, Patrick, we will bring you out of the green room into the main stage. And, of course, Zoom did this thing where it changes the way it looks no matter what I do to prep. But I'm fixing it, and everything is fine. Welcome in!
Hey, thanks. Good to see you guys.
Yes, so good to virtually see you. Glad you're, not in a gas mask, basically.
Yeah, I'm in DC, based in DC. So today was a bad day outside. A lot of mask wearing, and figured I would just stay indoors today. It's
Yeah, it's spooky.
Yeah, it's a little surreal. And I have a friend of mine who's actually like a photographer around the DC area and takes just tons of photos of memorials. And I just shared one of his posts from the Jefferson Memorial, where it's just so dystopian looking, and I'm just think, wow, what a way to capture this brief moment in time. Although I used to live in Los Angeles and I was in wildfire season constantly, so this is a little different because it's international fires that are affecting us as opposed to just California.
Right. Well, that's another thing we have in common. We used to live in Los Angeles as well. We
as
lived
well
there
as DC.
for 6 years, from 2009 to 14, 15.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, and it was a blast. When did you live there?
Still do?
Oh, I was there from 2012 till a couple of years ago.
Okay.
So almost a decade. Yeah, and then I moved to DC a couple of years ago, and then I started a lot of modular things in this area, which is really cool. We can talk about.
Sweet.
So we had some overlap.
Yeah, I always like to see like, ooh, we were sharing the same, latitude and longitude there at one point without knowing each other.
I got into modular during that era in LA, so.
Yeah, that 2012, 2013. Yeah.
I got into it probably right when you left, so I picked up where you left off because I started in summer of 2014. That was kind of where I took off. I bought a Moog Sub-Fatty, and I really liked the analog sounds, and I was trying to find something because I thought, DJing might have been the thing music-wise. I had a little bit of music background, piano and trumpet and stuff, but I'm like, what am I gonna do? And here I am in LA, a very music-driven city. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it? And that just didn't feel. I felt like it was going a direction that I wasn't really comfortable with, and um, it's not like DJing was difficult because you look at modular gear and you're like, that's nothing compared to,
Right.
turntablism or whatever. So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but yeah, I got this sub fatty and I just loved the analog sound. And it was right after that where I just started picking up all the modular gear. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Woohoo! Okay, we have lots of friends in the chat. We're getting a little explosion from Playful Fellow. Thank you for the follow. I have to remember to turn this off as well. And Tangents is here. Lots of friends. Welcome in, Tangent. Welcome in, Graphite Avatar. Got that one. Yeah, so all the friends are here. That's great. Oh, Celluloid's here too. So we have all these like threads of like DC friends and LA friends and Synth Picnic and Modular on the Mall and all these threads that we've been connected through just rad people who are super down to earth and just amazing artists. And we're just so just like overwhelmed by everyone's just contributions to the betterment of sound exploration. So I want to ask you a little bit more about how music shaped your life and sort of what memory you might have of like really electronic music or electronic sounds or synthesizers like grabbing you. Like, is that an early memory or is that a later exploration after doing more traditional music exploration?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of my drum. My brother played like Judas Priest and a lot of Iron Maiden and Rat, and just he played drums. So I'd come home and get off the bus. I'd just be hearing just like like Dream Theater, just like kind of muffled. You hear it in the window, and then you come indoors like running.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's like, this is awesome, and to hear my mom like, supper time. It's nothing. He just went on and on. So it's like I was always inspired by that, just because it was
Oh,
the
yeah.
rehearsals, the practice, trying to replicate things that were on the radio and all these things. And so yeah, he actually showed me. I had the Korg MS-10. He had a Korg MS-10, didn't need it for anything because he was a drummer, but somebody owed him something. He's like, well, it's been like forever since you haven't paid me, so can I just take your synth? He's like, whatever. So he had this synth as a payment, didn't really use it a whole lot, but he this is where the filter came in and what hooked me, because I was like 13 or 14, somewhere around there, and he
Mm-hmm.
played the Frankenstein song. It's all instrumental one by the Edgar Winter Group. That da 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 da
Mm-hmm.
da da
Mm-hmm.
da da, that whole thing.
Right.
I
So
love
it does
this.
that filter.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And I'm
Which
just
was
going.
an ARP
So
2600, if I'm not mistaken. I think, like in real life, like
yeah,
didn't Edgar Winter play an ARP 2600?
yeah, that was the
Yeah.
original instrument, but he replicated it on the
Right.
MS-10. Like, check this out. It was just like it's the biggest knob on the keyboard, and so he's
Yeah.
like turning it down and doing these, and I'm just like, I'm here.
I'm in. I'm
I'm
in.
in. It's so much for the drums. And you know, although I did, so then like the next thing I picked up was like the TR-505, like my very own like instrument, and it was a drum machine.
Mm-hmm.
Because like in high school, some guys were like, hey, we want to form like a rap band, but we need a drummer. And I'm thinking, well, I don't
Oh.
really know the drums like my brother does, but I could do the drum machine. So we had a gig, maybe two, where I was like, it was a three-piece band, really a poor man's version of like Beastie Boys. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was the in the back. I wore like a bobcat hat, and it's the whole thing. And these guys were just like talking like really like aggro violent things, and like, I don't know if this is what I want to do. I still have the TR-505 though. I still have the bobcat hat.
Oh, we need
'Cause
a
I think
post about
And
this.
the MS-10.
and the MS-10,
Oh my
which
god.
which was so funny because I didn't know how the patch bays worked at all.
Oh,
Because
right, yeah.
I'm just like, I don't know what these do. Are you supposed to plug in a wall? Like, I don't know what. And then like I didn't touch the patch bay forever. And then I got into modular, and then I came back. I'm like, oh. And then it just became this whole new instrument for me now. And I actually do
Mhm.
use it, record it, and do some sampling with it. But it's just like it's so interesting that when I was 13, I was just fascinated by the filter, and then here I am decades later, and I'm still learning new things from this piece of gear. Like, how cool is that? That something like that just has like this timeless part of my life. So I hold on to it dearly and I embrace it. And he gave it to me a few years back. He's like, you know what, just have it. It's like I kind of took it from him, but he's like I'll have no purpose for it. So because I was gonna like buy it outright, but so yeah, that was kind of the beginning of all of that. But then,
Well, let me hold on one sec, because
This is a
like
lot.
yes,
This we're
yes,
like, woo!
Korg MS-10 was my first
I
analog
know.
synth. And
wow,
so I'm
okay,
intimately familiar with it, and that's a pretty odd one. Like, I would say that I haven't really met anybody that was their first synth, honestly, like, personally. It had the pulse width modulation, which the MS-20 does not have. And, like, I remember, like, just, like, tweaking that, like, square wave and making the wave fatter and being like, oh, that's the coolest sound ever. And then the filter sounds really good, too.
yeah.
I feel like the filter is arguably, fatter or as fat as an MS-20 as well. And so I was like trying not to talk over you, like wanting to say that the whole time. So I'll stop there. But like,
Yeah,
but
that's
yeah,
really cool. I think the fact that your brother was a drummer, like as soon as you said that, I was like, all right, this story is gonna be amazing. I just already know, and that he was like cool and actually like. Not like, hey, I'm the older brother who plays drums, like, get out of here, Like, he actually is part of your story in getting into music and that it's an MS-10. I mean, that was just amazing. I love that so much. I'm going to geek out about
He
that
was
for a while.
probably like that though, because he's like, "Hey, lay off my drums. Maybe if I show you a synth, then
Oh.
because
it was a
because somewhere in that mix, I'm left-handed, so somewhere in that era of my life, I took his drum set and I reversed the whole thing for left-handers. So I would be like, so I would go instead of, and so I think he got mad.
That
So
makes
he's
so
like,
much sense because somebody in the
censor for
chats
you.
is already bringing up Freaks and Geeks. It's actually Jason Siegel's character in Freaks and Geeks that plays drums. And as soon as you said that, that was the vision I had was the scenes from Freaks and Geeks where he has the like, he can't get enough drums. He's trying to make the biggest set possible.
Right.
It's just amazing.
Who's James Franco anyway?
Yeah, I don't know who that is. Hey, Connecticut, I see you in here. Welcome in, Obama's Weed Man.
Cool.
So, just the
Oh,
fact that
well, Tangent's asking if she
Oh,
has to know the name of the band.
thank you.
So
I
I
meant
do
to say
remember
that.
the band, which is so interesting because I got in because I spent most of my career in television news. So the name of the band when I was 16 was called Channel X. And
Amazing.
yeah, and I didn't have a vocal role. I was just the finger drummer, and that was and to think that we would perform entire like shows with only 16, it's so limited, that the TR-505 is so limited. But just the being able to do an entire rap show with
Yay.
that, because nowadays if you see a TR-505 that's not circuit bent,
Yeah.
it's amazing because I've seen them where people it's like the best circuit bending like intro is just to rip apart a 505, and I've heard people do crazy things with it circuit bend, but I've kept it clean and
Mm,
try to,
Mod free.
that's amazing. I was
yeah,
going to say
mod
another
free.
one of our synth friends that we've had on, Killer Bee Relay Team, is a 505 guy as well, does the circuit bending, like has a fest on Twitch for 505 Day.
He's the 505
So,
guy, yeah, for sure.
so yeah. It's like Channel X sounds like a follow up to Videodrome. Yep. Yeah, that's
too
a
bad
great.
50 Too bad 505 Day is taken by Cinco de Mayo.
Oh, that's
Oh, that's a
true.
good point.
Or
Bummer.
maybe it's twice the fun.
Twice the fun. Yeah, there you go.
I
Double
think
G.
those things can go together. So
Sure.
that it was an amazing story, and I loved it so much. Two iconic pieces of gear, like just amazing. that you got introduced to those things so early. Can you bridge us to Modular from there?
Ooh, that's a stretch.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, from there, it's,
Were
I
there more
actually went,
rap groups or more bands that you were?
no, I mean, I think at that point I realized I like getting in well, there wasn't really a box to get into, but I liked doing some production. My first synth, like full blown synth, other than the core or the MS-10 was the Roland D20 but what was interesting about it is it had a floppy drive and then it would sequence. And so at the time, Madonna, it was like during the Madonna Vogue era and all these kind of like dance, pump up the volume was kind of
Oh,
big. And, and so I started doing that type of music sequenced with the floppy drives. And then I started doing my own stuff. So I was trying to replicate a lot of things on the charts. And, um, I went to college and did some scores for some people that did, college video projects are just ridiculously stupid, when you look at
yeah.
them 10, 20 years from, but then it's like I did this whole like cinematic, dramatic piece of something where, three or four guys were doing these skits where they're throwing like dummies out of windows and creating drama. And I'm just like, zoom, zoom, zoom with this D20. And it's like, that's kind of cool, So, and then I got into music and like in college and eventually I thought I was going to be like a music teacher. And I'm like,
Hmm.
I kind of like media. So then I actually got into media production and became an audio engineer. And so my degree is in audio production, but then I got into radio after that. So the music kind of steered me into radio, and I was like a production guy on a morning show. I was like the wacky guy in the back that would always I had the signature laugh when
Yes.
the host was like saying something completely corny because it was like an adult 25, 54 adult contemporary. You play like
Mm.
Elton John, Celine Dion,
Hmm.
uh, the Chumbawamba,
Oh my gosh. I was gonna say, I feel like
and
that's
I get knocked down.
growing up with that being like a type of radio show. It's like I thought eventually that stuff would phase out and we would have like a new crop of that, but it's like stayed still that.
yeah, it
Those
was
same
it was
artists, those same songs.
yeah,
That's true.
and we were kind of
It's
a
because there's no
music
music
heavy.
industry.
Yeah, and we were kind of a music heavy morning show. We were, they because it was adult contemporary. It wasn't just like there was like the Howard Stern crowds that were
Oh
happening on
yeah.
the other station where it's just all talk, but we wanted this mix and variety. And then we had it was like a variety show. Like we had guests, they had comedians come in, we would do funny bits. But what I really enjoyed, because I loved the production, is like back in the day, I would um just take sound bites and do just really funny production things. Like, because Pro Tools was one of the very first, like we had that in college, and that was when I walked out of college with Pro Tools experience. And I'm going in as an intern in this radio station. And it was right around 95, 96 where uh like the splicing of the tape was starting to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And digital editing was the thing, and Pro Tools had a 2 gig hard drive. Ooh. And so that was a big deal. But I had to
Hmm.
go in and train like 25 veteran disc jockeys on how to splice tape because they were moving to computers. They didn't want the big decks anymore because it just like so I was there in radio. I was there for like 4 or 5 years. So the first half of that was all just splicing. And then
Yes.
when you're in a morning show, it's like, okay, here's Sarah McLaughlin, da, 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 da. And then so you do this thing, you take the calls. And so while the music's going, I'm on the phone setting people up for the phone, like for these questions. And then they talk to the host. The host records it on the reel to reel. And that's for like 2 minutes of the song. And then you have another 2 minutes to kind of like go back and splice it up and edit it. And then if you don't get it done in time and you're coming back, says, "Hey, everybody, go to the Splash Fest at Six Flags this weekend. Here's Elton John." And then you go back and then you splice more. And so it was time consuming. So
Yeah.
having the digital, then it was one little box. So we had this reel to reel, and then it was like one little box that just had a single track that you could cut. I think it was called Audio Replay or something. But so for a while there, I would go in and I would edit, and the DJ was he was a pro. He's been doing this for 20 years. And I kind of went there as like kind of cut it up and did it really fast. But what they didn't like when they first got Pro Tools, they couldn't understand the delete button. Like, if I delete this piece of audio, where does it go? Because they're used to it just falling out as a tape on the floor. They couldn't understand non-destructive audio, and that was the hardest. These people were spinning Beatles records in the 60s, and I'm showing them this new technology. So,
Yeah.
So they weren't
so
feeling super
it,
safe with it.
You'll just be like,
yeah,
I can leave it in destructive mode if you want.
yeah, if you're up for it.
Right.
But that was my gateway into like working in radio and working in media and like taking that route because I knew where the technology was heading. And so
Wow. They probably
eventually,
thought you were like an alien from the future.
yeah, I mean, they saw it coming because like even as I left radio to go into television, they were just getting in all the machines were because we still had put things on floppy disk on CDs and they were
Mm.
carts. And all the commercials had little carts that looked like 8 tracks, and so you had to stack up the
Yeah.
carts for commercial breaks. So
Oh,
Hmm.
all
wow.
that was being replaced by digital, where it was just like like you stack a show, where it's like here's all the commercials. So I remember when we first went tapeless or CD-less, and it was like revolutionary, but that was just in a 4-year span. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that really helped me. So in some way, I stayed in the music part of business because I was in the radio, but I was a production guy. Like I was cutting up Bill Clinton like State of the Union addresses and making him say things, that he wasn't, and those types of
Oh my god.
bits that were funny. And I saved them all, and now I go back and look at it. It's like, man, it's so campy and cheesy, but it worked for the time. You know, I
Gosh.
I made Michael Jackson and Lisa Marie Presley say some really weird things when they did that big interview on ABC News. But that was entertainment.
Yeah, it was like the most exciting way you could play around with that stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it felt like anything was possible.
I'm
That's
pretty
so
sure
cool.
the B-77 is from a radio station. It was refurbished, but it was, radio station usage, and it's got an big editing block on it
Yeah.
still.
Wow.
Just ready to go for probably
Yeah.
exactly that use case.
Well, they had the part that I didn't like the most was that I wanted to save my pieces because it's like, hey, if I'm going in this career, you want to have a resume and a build, but it's like, how do you save? Because CD burners were hugely expensive, and you had to buy $15 blank
Oh
CDs.
yes, they were so
And
expensive.
so I'm like on Pro Tools, hitting play and hitting record, just hoping that it works because if you mess up, you've ruined a $15 CD. So I was able to keep my moments and then convert them later. But yeah, that was a ton of fun. So just having that kind of I learned a lot of lessons. It's one of those jobs where 5 years go by and you're out of the business, but you still have nightmares with it. Like there's some
Yeah.
things where it's just like I'm recalling these moments like that where of just like you're missing the spot or you're missing the hit or you're missing the play
Oh yes. Like
or
when you have nightmares that you like have to give a speech but you can't remember what it is and you don't have your papers. Like I can imagine
Right.
that like having nightmares of missing the cut back in moments to the commercial or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
that's amazing.
or
It stays with you.
the DJ is talking. We have all these little sound bites like Homer Simpson going woohoo and all these, and I'm hitting the wrong buttons and there's you suck. No, no, I meant the woohoo, not the you suck. Ah! And then you wake up in a sweat. You're like, what happened?
Wait, that wasn't
Uh,
real. Yeah,
yeah,
that
so
pressure
that's
of real time, like there's no delay, it's all hands on. That pressure is like you can't replicate that, you know.
no,
That's wild.
it's and it was good because I considered it an early form of social media in some way
Hmm.
because I got really good involved in social media when in its infancy for years, which really got me into television. But in some way, it felt a lot like that, where it's like you say something and then people call as a response.
Mm-hmm.
And then so it's like they're commenting to a post and then you're
Mm-hmm.
engaging with that. And then when you reshare a post, it's like you're playing back the message that the phone caller made. So in
Mm-hmm.
some aspects, the platform has been changing our whole lives, but like the messaging is still
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
the same. Except
Yeah.
now we have algorithms which drive us crazy. But at the time,
Right,
uh,
right.
you know, so that's, uh, so I think that's probably why I enjoyed getting into social media and doing that part for a little while and getting into television and all that was, so I did get out of music for a while but then I really stayed into, I bought Ableton and I really wanted to stay in the box a little bit and just kind of learn that for a while. But it wasn't really until, you guys familiar with Cell Dweller? He's a artist. He's kind of a hard rock, punk rock kind of guy. He does a lot of soundtracks and film
Hmm.
scoring, and I've just got to know him over the years.
That sounds super familiar to me. Like I feel like if I were to see a thing, I
You
would,
need the visual.
I would know
Yeah,
him.
he's a guy. It's got red hair. Like he was known for this red hair, and
Oh
he just
yeah.
did really interesting videos and really aggressive sounding, really thick, almost like heavy metal, but with a lot of electronics in it. So I
Sweet.
remember seeing,
Okay.
a video of his where he had all this modular gear.
Mm.
And I'm like, what is this? And he just took
Oh.
like the Harvestman Hertz donut and just did like this dual oscillator turn. I'm like, what is this magic? Like, what is this demonry I'm looking at? This is amazing.
Yeah.
And that was really my launch into getting into modular because I just like that organic sound and being able to
Mm-hmm.
start with a saw wave
Mm-hmm.
or just anything and then just
Mm-hmm.
subtract out of that and just make really cool, bleepy bloopy things at the time.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, but I had that whole gap for a long time where I was just kind of learning things as hobbies and trying to every now and then I try to do music for television or something, but it was just more me just goofing around as opposed to trying to make it a career.
Mm.
Um, because I got too involved in the management part of things, and then that kind of took over a lot of that. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That totally makes sense. So what got you to a place where now the focus is more modular and you're playing live, you've got community building going on. I mean, there's just like a whole world on the other side of this timeline now that we can jump to.
Yeah, well, so that was all the time I had spent in Los Angeles. I was working at a TV station that was just a mile or so from Analog Haven, which was the mecca of modular, and I so once I knew about about that store and I heard about the synths, my wife and I were actually in LA at the same time. We got married in DC and then we moved to LA and then we were there a couple of years and then she's in media, so she's like an anchor for news, and so she took a job. She was into to the East Coast to try to advance her career, so she went long distance and moved to Tampa, and I
Mm.
was in Los Angeles, and so I figured it would be a year or two, but we were going to make it work. We were going to see each other and do the plane rides and all that, and so yeah, so then that's when I'm like, okay, I saw this cell door thing. I'm just gonna go right into it. So I dropped her off at the airport and then went straight to the synth shop, which at the time there's another one called Big City Music, which is in Studio City. There's like so many synth shops in LA. It was
Yeah.
amazing. It was like now I'm like, oh, I loved it.
Oh,
And I went in
Went
there
to
just
both of those
clueless.
places. Well,
quite a bit. Yeah.
well, I did like the drive by where Sean would meet you at a taco truck or stand or something to give you your modules. Like if you ordered them locally, he'd save you the shipping. But yeah, like Big City, definitely went to their showroom a couple times when we were there.
Yeah, and it's never thought I'd go into a scent shop where you're just like you have to have they have to call in advance and make an
Mm.
appointment to go in. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this is just like a kind of a warehouse with a little showroom. It was such a weird thing. But I loved it. And after like
Yeah.
30 minutes, I did a little boop boop and figured it out. And I walked out of there with like a 2 row. And a week later, I'm like, I need to expand my 6U case to 12U. I just know I'm going to need more. And then the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing just,
I was gonna say, we know where it goes from there.
You got your
yeah.
Mellotron from Big City Music,
Yeah.
didn't you? Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
And
I
then,
loved
yeah, and then
that.
from that was also right around the time when Rodent was performing, and I got to know him through the circles, through the scent shops, and he was starting up Modular on the spot. which was the summer of 2015.
Wow.
And so I heard about this, and I'd already started getting in. And of course, Instagram was doing video, like the timing of everything was really interesting because Instagram was doing 15-second videos.
Mm-hmm.
That was a new
Mm-hmm.
thing for them. And so I started doing 15-second videos of my stuff. And that started getting some attention because of the hashtags and all that. So then I started learning about the community through Instagram, like we
Yeah.
still do today.
Yeah, literally.
And so I heard about the Mott's event, and I went out for the first show, and I'm just like, wow, like this is you're at a park, and they've got a generator that's just humming with this huge extension cord that goes like 200 feet away, so you don't hear it. And someone brought a surge system, and Rodin had a modular, and it's like this is really, and it's in a park, like this is quite fascinating. And then I played the second show. And so I was kind of hooked on that. And then Analog Haven was doing like showroom. They'd bring in some manufacturers and then they wanted performers. Then I got a call from Skylar, who was working at Analog Haven at the time as Kitty Spit. And he called me like a week before one of the shows. He's like, dude, you want to play a show here? And it's like 6 days notice. What? And then I thought I was going to use them more for sound design because I had already worked with Pro Tools and things, and I thought this would be really kind of cool. But I got the bug. Like Kitty Spit guy gave me the bug. He gave me 6 days, and I was so nervous, and I did it like a 20-minute performance, and then you just get the high from that. I'm like, oh, this is,
Mm-hmm.
and then the vibe and the people and just the comfort level and just the curiosity of learning gear, and this is yeah, this is really cool. And there was so many people in that part of the city that
Mm-hmm.
was interested in it. And then you had Mott's going, and it just kept getting more and more interest in it. And so I really just fell in love with that whole idea of bringing synth music out and playing and just hanging out with friends and learning just constantly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was kind of the beginnings there. And then over the years, like I just kept going to the shows, and this was also my therapy for working in news because news
Oh,
is very stressful.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that was kind of an interesting time, but it was evolving into something that um, was just taking up a lot of my time, and so it was really getting harder for me toward the end, where I couldn't hardly go out and play without getting interruptions. That some things were happening, and
Yeah.
and so it just kind of became more 24/7, and I really wanted to focus on some of my music. And so yeah, so at the time, like Noise Engineering was kind of a new company, and I was helping them at NAMM doing some demos because I could tell like Steven was in there by himself, just like trying to show off like so many awesome pieces of gear and just all these different utilities. And so I'm like, maybe I'll get to learn a little bit if I just volunteer to go to a NAMM show. And so I did
Nice.
that for a couple years, and then they liked my music, the Instagram videos, and thought, well, we need someone to do demos. And so I did those for a few years, just like on the side.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, cool.
yeah, but yeah, it's just such an integral part of my life now. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool, and just to see like to come here after all the pandy stuff, I moved back to the west coast or back to the east coast where my wife is, and then we started I like doing the modular on the spot in LA so much, and I wanted to try something similar here, so then we started doing shows here.
Yes, this is the segue we've been all waiting for. So, so the way that we were introduced to you was the modular and the mall guy. So that's sort of the visual that we got was like, oh wow, so they're doing like modular on the spot, but it's in DC, and there's like obviously the mall and the beautiful architecture and just like the whole vibe of it is on another level. And we've seen some of that footage, so it's very exciting to like get to chat with you like this after seeing all of that. And when did that start?
So that started in the summer of 2021, so a couple years ago. And
Okay, gosh, what is
when I
time? Oh my god.
moved when I moved to the East Coast to be with my wife and reunite after 7 years, it would end up being 7 years. We were long distance.
Wow. Oh,
Wow.
you guys should write a book about that.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, it's so funny because I dropped her off at the airport and started Modular the same day, and she doesn't. It's like she has these weird like she flashbacks. She's like, I think we were in the same room at some point. Like so for 7 years, like my wife, the life I had with my wife on the travels, and then the Modular stuff never like converged until I
Wow.
came to DC. So totally, she loves it. She's a big
I was
supporter.
gonna say, how did that go?
It's great. Well, I'm in this the second bedroom now is basically my studio.
That's a good
But
sign.
yeah, so that's a good sign, and so she lets me gives me the space that I need, and it's been wonderful. So
That's
uh
awesome.
yeah, so I started doing the modular on the mall because we didn't have anything that was sort of like modular on the spot. But I wanted to be a little different too. We originally called it modular on the spot, but then I soon realized, being in DC, that we kind of wanted to open it up a little more than just modular, because the culture here was so different.
Hmm.
There was a lot more synth people. Like
Yeah, there's not
there's
all the
one,
modular shops in DC like they have in LA.
Right.
yeah, there's one shop, Chuck Levin's, which is a great shop here,
Hmm.
but then the next one is Control in Brooklyn, so it's 250 miles away.
Yeah.
So we incorporate a lot more synth, so that's why I changed the name to Modular on the Mall. And plus the way that we do it's different, where we kind of we the memorial was just I I was hoping for the best and said this is an incredible venue. I remember walking up to it when I would visit my wife years before. I'm like,
Hmm.
man, could you imagine having like a modular show here and we would just like dream it? Because the way the dome is, and it's just it bounces around, you get the surround sound. It's a bandstand like in 1931, John Philip Sousa, like when they inaugurated the memorial, John Philip Sousa came out in 1931 with his 40-piece band, and they went on the bandstand and played and celebrated. And like this memorial is meant for musicians. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a war memorial, and you think, well, everybody has to kind of be quiet
Somber.
and
Yeah.
somber and
Hmm.
respectful, but this is not. Like there's weddings there, there's theater performances, and of course our shows.
Wow.
So I just took a chance and talked to the parks department, and made it work. So I squeeze in my shows in and out of weddings because the weddings is huge. It's like
Oof.
99.9% weddings, and
Yeah.
there's me.
That is amazing. I want
Yeah,
a
so
crossover to happen now. That somebody wants modular at their wedding.
yeah, well,
Ooh.
actually, there's
Oh,
a
it's like it's already happening. Oh.
that actually did happen our first year at one of the shows, because you have to have a permit for everything.
Yeah.
Where
Hmm.
LA felt more underground, we could hang out by the LA River and take your chances and play
Right.
till the
Oh
cops
yeah.
come,
It's all about stealing
Yeah,
locations in LA.
Hmm.
yeah. And so here, everything has to be permitted because, like, the national parks has their own police department.
Yeah.
Like everything
Yeah.
is so,
You're on federal ground.
yeah. And I think
Scary.
there's a lot of performers here and enthusiasts that they have families and they want to bring their families out. So really the idea of a picnic is really true to form
Mhm.
in this city versus elsewhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I called the parks department. We got it all formalized and paid for the permits. They gave me a deal on the permit, so I didn't have to pay like $120 every show.
Oh my
So I was
gosh.
able to stretch it out over a certain time period so that I called it a series, which is one permit versus event, 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 event.
Very
Oh,
smart.
that's nice.
Yeah. So yeah, we made it all legit. I got a portable battery, one of those Jackeries, and I already had a lot of the sound system stuff already.
Hmm.
And then it all worked out, and we just showed up. And Jono Wells,
Mm.
I was telling him about this, and so I told him I was going to do it. I think it's all set up. I think it's going to happen. I mean, I just moved to LA. I just moved to DC like in less than a month. I was trying to plan this, but I had
Hmm.
so many things going on. I live in a new city. It's like
Yeah.
I'm
Hmm.
planning this while my shit's going across the country.
Yeah.
Right.
Odd.
Hmm.
And yeah, and so he said on the Modular World show, like I asked him if he wanted to play because he was going to come bring his family in for the summer for a DC vacation, And he said on the show, I'm just going to announce it. I'm going to do it. And so he announced it on the show. I'm like, okay, I guess it's going to
It's
happen. So
real
he
now.
played our first show, which was so cool.
That made me think that he was from DC,
Hmm.
actually. Like, I think we both thought he was from DC because of that show.
Ah,
Iconic.
yeah.
And we were wrong.
Yeah, it's hard to sell.
But
Everything's a mystery.
that was like almost like a rumor we created for ourselves because of that show. So yeah, that show was huge, man. Like I feel like I know that
Yeah.
show, and uh,
It's,
epic.
Yeah.
it's just the beginning of the story of kind of where we're at now. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I wasn't planning on doing a lot of video because it was so much work because you got to haul everything onto this bandstand and the speakers, and you can't just park right by the memorial. You got to start at the World War II memorial and
Hmm.
just drag everything over, and the setup was just a lot. Um, but yeah, it worked out great, and so um, yeah, so we had that show, and then like later in the year, because since you do have to have permits for the war memorial, um, a wedding did show up with like 10 people, and they're like, didn't know you had to have a permit for this. And so
Oh.
we're all playing, and they showed up. So we had a wedding ceremony and the side while we were bleeping and blooping, and this wedding was happening. I'm just like, I just had this grin on my face the whole time, like performers, wedding. Like,
Well,
please, this is the best.
can't believe I said that, and then you're like, well, actually, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. You
Yeah.
have so you said started in 2021. That makes sense, logically. um, and you have some big events coming up actually this month,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah,
make
so we're
sure
kicking it
anyone
off.
in the DC area.
Yeah, we're starting our series of shows. We have four, maybe five that we're doing. But yeah, the first two are, well, we'll put it this way. It's been kind of difficult with the Parks Department lately
Oh,
because, like, when I first started doing the show, it was still COVID and nobody knew, like, nobody was getting married. And I'm like,
right.
hey, can I reserve the memorial? They're like, sure, you're the modular people. Yeah, they're just so chill. And then
Mhm.
every year now, it's just been harder. So now I have two shows in
Mhm.
June because of a bunch of mishaps with people not communicating, and but we worked it out.
Oh wow.
So the first show I'm gonna have Travarsi from Southern California.
Wow.
She's flying in for a show she's already doing for Juneteenth. And then
Nice.
Bernard is a local artist who runs Black Techno Matters, and so he's playing my show and then doing a show with Travarsi. They're doing a great Black Techno Matters Liberate Us event that goes into Juneteenth, like midnight, goes into the celebration day
Oh,
itself.
that'll be happening in DC.
Yeah, so they're
Okay.
doing that on the night of the 18th, going into June 19th, but then the 17th is our show. And since they're already in town, I'm like, oh, this is great because I've known Travarsi for many years in LA. So
Mhm.
she's coming in. They're like, we can squeeze in the show. So her and Bernard are playing. Then I have Chaka Benson from Delaware and Black Moth from the DC, Maryland area.
Wow.
Yeah, and Autograph, who's from like DC, Baltimore area. He's just been a huge fan, has come out to all our shows. So yeah, we're doing like a Juneteenth celebration with our first show. And then the week after that, we're doing another show. So we're doing back to back like
Ooh.
Saturday shows in June.
Wow.
I was trying to do them more spread out, but the Parks Department's like, we accidentally booked a wedding on the time of your permit. So can you change your like there's a cross where I was stuck, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I'm not gonna say no, these people can't get married
Yeah.
because you know.
Sorry, modular is more important.
And so luckily everybody was able to adjust for
Oh
that.
wow.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Like, and what I do like about this show, and also thank you to Jono for giving me the motivation to record the videos for these because I wasn't
Yeah.
gonna do video at all, and then he's
Ooh.
like, do video,
Gotta
and
do video.
now that we do video, my wife is great. She's got one of those gimbal like
Oh
iPhone.
yeah.
So she
Those are
does all
great.
these like, and because we're in a dome and it's circular and everybody plays in the middle, I've always wanted everyone to kind of like be on the outside and kind of look in as opposed to being a stage in a park.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Theater in the
So
house.
every shot is just these, like you can sit wherever you want. If you want to see the gear with the artist, you sit
Oh
here.
yeah.
If you want to see just the expressions of the artist, get in the front. It's like it's really open. And the breeze is nice, and there's people on the lawn. Then you have like kids playing, like high school kids playing in the hockey fields, like they're doing soccer. And then you've got the Segway people that come by and
The
like, what's
Segway
going
people.
on?
That's very real.
And so as we're shooting these videos, and like we would actually would my wife would go around the memorial and just kind of get a shot as a glimpse in a 360. You just see all this activity, and it's like it makes it look like there's hundreds of people there. But it's just very busy. But yet under the dome, there's this intimacy
Mm-hmm.
that I have never experienced anywhere else because the sound kind of goes up and it reverberates and creates a natural like surround,
Ooh.
um, which is really cool. Like so we don't do the show unless it's at the dome. So if it rains really bad, we just kind of have to cancel it.
Mm-hmm.
So far we haven't had that issue. Now, if I was having a show this weekend, I would be like, the smoke, it's not gonna work.
Oh
But
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
It's pretty bad. Yeah,
um,
the Segway people, it's makes the landscape of being in DC so hilarious to me. I love it. I grew up in the DC area, went to college in DC. We met in DC, got married in DC, lived there on and off. I don't know how. Is this your first time having lived there?
I lived in DC before I went to LA. So my
Okay.
wife and I had a history here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was gonna
we
say there's this thing about the DC area that my friends and I always talk about, that it's like this parallel universe that like sucks you in and out of it. Like you're never done with it. Like I always say, like, well, we haven't lived there in years, but like it would be like our seventh time, going back and living there again. It just like keeps pulling you back. I don't know why. trying to cut that cord, but there's something about it, and just knowing, having grown up there, and just like the late nights on the mall, being there alone and no one's there, and just like the magic of how it feels to be in those monuments, especially acoustically. Like very viscerally know what that feels like, and can just like want so badly to be there for one of these now, to experience Modular in those spaces. It's so special.
Be worth the trip.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it keeps calling you back because my wife actually, she first came to DC. She interned with Ted Koppel for the news.
Ooh,
So she was entering with him,
that's
and
legit.
then we both came back the second time around. Well, my first time, her second around 2008, and then in 2012 I went to LA, and then now we're back a third time. So it does keep pulling you in, and
It's
every experience is different. Like
mm-hmm.
when I was here first, I'm like, oh, it's social media and Twitter. Like you could meet people on Twitter and say, hey, we're all hanging out at this British bar. You want to come hang out? We would just do these tweet ups, we called them. And we would just get together and just hang out because you just met somebody on Twitter. I'm like, I would not do that now. But back
That's
then it was
crazy.
the thing. We would do these tweet ups. It was a lot of fun.
Wow, you're
Uh,
very much like, I feel like your story is like you're always like at the beginning of something. You're like right there as something's changing or starting, and just like early adopter, and just having these cool experiences with it before it like stops being fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way. Maybe that's just I did feel that way a lot when I worked in news because we were always the first to break news. We were the first to kind of report things. So
That
maybe
must
that's
be
just
it.
part of the hard wiring that I have, that's part of I guess the adrenaline rush that you get, just kind of being right on the tip of the wave. And there's also the fear that I'm going to get, if I don't learn, like if I'm
Mm,
not at that level, I'm just going to get washed up with everything else and then have to play catch up. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Ooh, that's cool. I like that. Oh, hey, Noise, welcome in. Been digging those DC Mall Synth Dome videos. See? Videos. That's what does it. Key.
Yeah, we want to create the FOMO for that for sure. And but yeah, my wife doing the videos and then matching it up, and then we give everyone a video for them to take, which we really we try to do the same angles and just to show.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just such a really cool experience. And until you see, like, the artist is so focused on their their performance, and then when they see the video, like,
Oh
oh wow,
God,
yeah. So I
that's
still
so
have some
cool.
videos. Actually, sadly, I have some videos from last year. I'm still editing because so much kind of happened last year with some things. So I'm gonna edit those and then stay on top of the ones for this year so we can keep all that really active because it is
I
really
know
a
how that
cool
feels.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for it seems like there's a lot of people who are new to it, so maybe it's the first time they're getting to actually like hear what they're doing in open air with other people and sort of this like reflection back. And I think that's really like an amazing gift that you're giving to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being on the National Mall is like because we looked at a bunch of parks and it just didn't fit the vibe. Like you can't tell where
Mm.
you are,
Yeah.
And the Lincoln Memorial would be well, there's only like three places you can really set up. There's like the George Mason Memorial, then there's the War Memorial, then there's like the Jefferson, like the South Lawn, which is right next to
Mm-hmm.
a major highway. So if you're doing ambient, you just forget about it. But this is kind of nestled in the
Mm-hmm.
tree. There's a breeze, and it's just like it's a if you go off because we're just south of the reflecting pool.
Mm-hmm.
So if you kind of go off that beaten path, you'll discover
That's
this amazing
perfect.
music. So
Yeah, because
yeah.
anything else would attract too much of the traffic of just people. Who knows? Mixed bag of types of people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's the one thing is because we don't really own the venue and it is a government property, it's they could shut it down for any reason. If the government shuts down,
Yeah,
we can't have our shows.
that's
If
right.
there's a protest that gets out of hand, we
Mm-hmm.
can't really do our shows. So we're not in the direct line of where people would
Mm-hmm.
do a
Exactly.
lot of
That would
that.
be
So
wild.
that's yeah.
That would make it harder to really keep it special because man, that tourist traffic mixed with the energy of people like rushing for a vote that's happening or something, just like it's all happening right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild. So
So
wow, that's so
so
cool.
it's been really a lot of fun. We've found a really great group of synth people here, and it's we try to do meetups monthly. My
So
friend
you
Barry
do meetups
Schmetter.
monthly for this or outside of that location? You're trying to meet up monthly as well.
So outside of that,
Mm-hmm.
my friend here, Barry Schmetter, he goes by Resonance Space. He does these monthly meetups at a place called Rhizome,
Oh yeah.
which is a house that they converted into an art space. And so every month we get together and do different theme things, whether it's drones or DIY or just like
Mm-hmm.
featuring modules. So there's a monthly thing that happens all the time now. It used to be on Zoom before I got here, but it's good to be out and about and see people. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
feel
we're
like the
trying to.
noise scene and like house shows was what we experienced when we lived there. So it wasn't necessarily that people
Hmm.
understood what we were doing with modular, but there was a lot of noise music. So the idea of maybe having a bunch of pedals or something going on was sort of like a gateway for people to understand kind of what we were doing, and it gave us like a little way in to still have a little community.
I think Razom
Mhm.
opened right before I went out to Cupertino.
Well, I'm sure we can fact check that. But just the fact that you brought up Rhizome was just like whoop, lighting me up of like, oh yeah, that time when we weren't really like we were sort of a band who had been playing shows in actual venues, but we were doing this experimental stuff that wasn't fitting those bills, and we wanted a space to experiment and play live and see how it felt for people. And so the DC Baltimore house show scene was like how we got to experience that and meet people who then, knew Charles Cohen, who's one of our, biggest influences on Buchla.
R.I.P. Yeah.
So there were like little threads, but nothing like what you have going on now. So it's really exciting to see that blossom.
How was the? I'm always curious because I like to tap into to some of that, some of that scene that's been here for a long time and find ways to kind of merge the two just to kind of grow our audience and then also
Oh
introduce our
yeah.
audience. So how like were people fairly receptive to that? Like, did you find that it
To the
was
well,
it
basically like
worthy or
I think
valuable?
what it was labeled as was like, I mean, I don't know what if this means anything anymore, but it was the DIY scene. So we were we were putting on shows ourselves, we were doing it ourselves, there was no labels, there was no bookers, it was just this idea of community, and less rigidity around genre. So I think at the time there was like people who had established that their house was one of the places where they had figured out how to not piss off the neighbors or the cops or whatever, so we could do shows there. And the community was like super open and welcoming, so eventually, you know, we could start collaborating on setting the shows up ourselves so that we could have kind of a say in the type of thing that would be happening, or the other artists that would play. But there would always be, you know, still like a rock influence in some way there. But this is like, who knows how long ago now that things have changed so much, especially with the past 3 years of so many people getting into modular because of the pandemic, or just timing wise, finally having the space to explore that. So I don't know if I'm answering your question at all, but I'm trying to think back to like who those people were. Are they even still in DC? Like, what remains of that because of the issues with housing and people maybe not being able to stay in those places. And a lot of things like, I don't know if this is true of Rhizome or not, but people would establish their house, they would call it something, and then if they moved, we would still call it that. You know, if those same people were still involved, but it wouldn't be the same location. So it did get kind of tricky to like keep up with like where things actually physically were over time. Obviously Facebook was the main tool. I don't think we really even had Instagram as much, or weren't using it in the same way, because like you said, like they didn't even have video for a long time on Instagram. So yeah, I don't know if I have a clear sense. Did you have
So I hear a lot
anything?
of artists I talk to in modular. They talk about this era in the 2000s where they were
Mm-hmm.
just a lot of noise bands, and that's kind of, I don't know if it just kind of died out because they're getting older, or if it's just that the scene um it's still there. They just wanted to do something different in their careers or in their, you know, their journey. Um,
It
but
feels
I'm
like it's
trying to
had
find.
these, yeah, it's had these like peaks and valleys, and like I do feel like, so it would have been probably like 2018 was probably the last time we were plugged in there. Um, we moved to Brooklyn, and so we were kind of like back and forth a little bit, but then obviously pandemic changes everything. So up like around that like 2017 2018 time, it was like really going, but also starting to crumble at the same time. For these same reasons, people are getting older, they're moving out of these houses, you know, things are getting gentrified. We can't, you know, now they put up a condo building there, we can't do our noise show here anymore.
Well, we retreated
Um,
to a private space in Northern Virginia where we made an album during that time that
mm-hmm.
you're talking about. Like, we kind
Yeah.
of like pulled out of being connected to DC even though we were still pretty close. Um, so I feel like that's probably why you're.
Well, it was like simultaneous, like the
Because I don't have any
communities that
feedback.
we
I don't have
were.
anything to contribute there, honestly. Like, and it's because we were like doing that.
You were in full on like building modules mode. You were like, I'm soldering. I'm gonna learn this for a while. Like, this is what I'm talking about and what I'm into. And if
I
you're
built
not
a bunch
into
of
it,
Buchla
like,
modules at
I
that
don't have
time.
anything
Yeah.
else to contribute.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was a really interesting time.
That's how I
And
have most of my system. I just took the
trying to
time and
think.
did it before the component shortage.
Yeah,
Luckily.
like the like 3 or 4 different communities or homes I can think of, like I know they don't exist anymore. So that is a really interesting point that you bring up, that there is, the people are still there, and what you're doing would absolutely be, I think, of interest. But I'd be really curious this is gonna make me want to go like check in with everybody now and see where everybody's at, if they've evolved
Yeah,
into
it's just,
modular.
I mean, because there's so many great venues that are very just, they're perfect, I would say, Instagram friendly. You know, like you go
Mm.
there and it's like, wow, just like there's so much, you could tell there's history, that
Mm-hmm.
something here was happening.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a show in August with the guy, he goes by Toy Drummer, and he drums, but I'm going to do modular. We're doing it in August, and it's just at a really cool, like, it's called the Pie Shop, and I'm like,
Mm.
but then you just look at the photos, and it's like it's got a great stage, the lighting is amazing, and they're just these, 75 people kind of max
Mm-hmm.
venues. There's like there's probably hundreds of those in DC,
Yeah.
and like, there's got to be a scene that we can do more of these shows so that
Well,
I'm
yeah, I
not
think
worrying about the rain all the time.
yeah, especially with the rain issue. I was thinking like, man, you can't do that all year round. First of all, and then the seasons you can, it rains and storms a lot in DC.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's tons of that size of places. But the trick that we had with that was that, maybe it's not the person doesn't answer the emails, or that booker person's only there like Tuesdays at 10 p.m. and they were doing shows but they're not anymore, or like there's just so much of that. But not to be a naysayer, I think you should definitely do that. And I think, I wouldn't say if you build it they will come, but like if you book it they will come. And
Okay.
yeah, I think that's the scene is you.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, sure. And it's funny because what one of the things we were wanting to do is actually get into like long-term goals is to get into a Smithsonian and like
Oh
an
yeah.
action and just say, well, we've been doing a show on the mall for a while, so let's just go indoors. And we did reach out to to one Smithsonian just to see what it
It's
was
gonna.
like, just to go through that experience.
Mm-hmm.
But from what I hear with the Smithsonian's is that you just, if it fits what they're wanting to do, then you're kind of in. It's not like they're like, well, it's going to cost this amount of money. It's like it's a different approach than what like the dive bars and
Oh,
other
completely
places.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just gonna drop this in the chat because the one time we played a Smithsonian was for the Loose. It's called Loose Unplugged. We were very much plugged in.
No.
But they do a concert series, so it's basically just like, I don't know if Anne is still the person who books them, but just like, walk in there and she's at the desk and, oh, this date's open. Do you want it? And it's the American Art Museum, and the space is it's the 2-story hall with all of the marble statues, and so freaking cool. Such a cool space. So I dropped that
Awesome.
link there for just because I
Okay.
didn't want to forget to share
And
that
that
with
was
you.
a really late thing that we did. That was one of the
That-
latest gigs that we played
That's
there.
something Tangents and I always talk about. Like, we need to revive the weird stuff we were doing at that show, and doing things in museums is, to me, like the perfect combination of
Oh yeah, it was really
Yeah.
fun.
the
Well,
energy you want to feel in the space. Yeah, especially the
speaking of,
Smithsonian's.
It was inspiring.
I mean, yeah, I mean, speaking of tangent and museums,
Yes,
like
yes. Oh, perfect.
we're just
Yes.
coming off of this high from the Synth Picnic and the Sound Scene Fest that happened. That was at the Hirshhorn. It was a 2-day event this past weekend, and Tangent Universes like crushed it and just did like it was just so great to walk up and just see a picnic of gear just outside of the Hirshhorn. Like, wow, this is really like it happens or it's happening and you're a
Yeah.
part of it and there's interactivity and kids are coming with their families and just like trying to figure out a theremin and just learning what that is. And
Such
um
a gateway for kids.
yeah, and of course Tangent brought a synth that's a cat, it's like a cat synth. So so
Oh
she would hook
yes.
it up, so there was like these many the monologues and the theremins and modular, and then so it's all this like cacophony of just sounds, and then you kind of hear this meow 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 meow, because the kids like playing, and I'm just like, this is
That's
amazing,
awesome.
just like shed a tear.
Oh my
But then the
gosh.
whole like scene was great. Like even inside the Hirshhorn, there's these exhibits, and um just it opens your eyes to just the art of this as opposed to just the performance and trying to create
Mm-hmm.
a techno or an ambient or an experimental track. Like, there's connections where the one outside of Tangent had her own installation with Ice Locust and Alma and Matt Muirhead. There's a bunch of artists that I know that she
Mhm.
knows, and they have the artwork, and then you can listen to the art. It kind of works together, and you can listen to the soundtracks of things
Mm-hmm.
while you're looking at the art. And it's like really great experience. You're getting this senses
Yes, it looked
Mm-hmm.
feel to it.
amazing.
And
Like,
then
Yeah,
there was
I
a
had
guy who,
serious wanted to be there. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and but just like everywhere you turn, there's like something completely different. Like another couple from Budapest had this tapestry that you could touch, and she had designed the tapestry in such a way where if you looked at when you looked at the design, it actually matched where the sensors were behind it that was connected to a modular system through Max MSP, so you could create drum beats and do this nice morphogene warping and all this. And
Oh wow.
um, it was just like how cool. And so it's like
Mm-hmm.
when you see of course I saw a Modular. I'm like, okay, I gotta really talk to this guy. Like, okay, I need to know a little bit of how the sauce is made here. And so he really explained it. And I told him I worked in Modular for company. And of course he's like, oh, well then let me show you this. Like he really went granular with it.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. The story I remember the most was that he's like, we were testing this in Budapest and we were just trying to figure things out. But then, like, every few minutes, we would get this noise that would just like take over the sound. And we're like, oh, it must have been a power issue or something. And so they got like clean power and tried, and they kept getting this noise surges every few minutes. And he's just, as an artist trying to do an exhibition, you're like, what is this? He said it
Mm-hmm.
turned out that the subway system under the building, when the subway would go underneath, it would create all this static, which would reflect in the sensors behind the tapestry.
it's like a Tesla coil. Oh my
Exactly. I'm like,
god.
wow, like,
Wow.
okay,
That's
the things you
crazy.
learn as you're,
Mm-hmm.
building something. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that was great. Like I just want to try to find some sort of thing to do. And then my wife and I both walked around and we had lunch, and then we thought of a bunch of ideas of things we would like to try that would make sense. That has to be interactive. It's
Yes, that's the cool part. Yeah.
yeah, just like getting in and touching and getting
Hmm.
that sensory is like the key. So I'm all crazy about this, and hopefully,
Oh, this is
yeah,
so exciting. So that was Sound Scene Fest, right? And that was at the
at the
Hirshhorn. So
Hirshhorn,
make sure
yeah.
everybody knows the Hirshhorn is the modern art museum in DC, and it is the coolest building, and it's like my favorite of all the museums
It is
to
really
go
cool.
to. It's the
Very
best.
cool.
And if
yeah,
anything's going to have an interactive exhibit, like they have the Ai Weiwei exhibits and it takes over the whole floor and, that kind of stuff. And it's round, exactly. I'm obsessed, especially in DC because it's a very imposing sort of everything's a rectangle, right? And then you have these beautiful round buildings that pop up. You're like, yes, something cool is going on here.
Oh yeah, and Tangent, hi Tangent. She posted the link to the EJ Tech who did
Oh,
the
cool.
tapestry
That was the
mural
tapestry?
behind
Okay.
it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yes, so Sound Scene Fest, Synth Picnic, Hirshhorn. There were interactive exhibits, but there were also spaces where people could just hang out and play with the cat synth. Oh, the videos I saw from it, just that feeling of getting to see somebody else have their first experience with an interactive sound device is you get that little jolt watching it. So
Yeah.
I hope there's more video from it to come, but there was a lot of good in the moment stuff people were posting that I was really happy to get to see.
Yeah, wouldn't
Oh,
it be
cool.
great if we could figure out how to experience something again for the first time? Like, wouldn't that be the greatest pill to take?
Yes. 100% I'm on board with this idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the thing. That's that.
Oh,
Uh,
cool. Tangents. Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah, it was really, really cool. So much fun. And Tangent's been a big fan of the Module and the Mall shows, and she played last year. She's playing our show later in the fall.
oh,
So,
good.
and
Awesome.
we started to do quad shows too, which is cool, like in that space. So,
Yes.
yeah. But you were
Playing a
talking
lot of
about
it.
seasonal
Mhm.
earlier. We had a really hot August last year, and I was really nervous because we run on everything on a solar power battery.
Oh.
And so it was like mid 90s, and all of a sudden you just saw the percent, because I had a little percentage indicator on the generator, and so it's like every minute it was just dropping. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna make it, because it was working so hard to try to generate energy when it was already like in the mid 90s, even in the shade. I'm like, oh, this is terrible. So as soon as the sun went down, it just like it was fine.
Mm.
And I know in the cold weather it won't work it won't work if it's less than freezing. So we take our chances there too. But so now we have a backup generator, which is that we needed it for the quad shows, because when you have 4 speakers versus 2, you're really
Yeah.
doubling power.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider, especially when you compare that to the fact that Modular on the Spot started in LA. Kind of explains a lot. Having lived there, like, sure, people think of it as a hot, sunny place, but like the weather generally is like pretty dry, pretty consistent most of the time. And like you said, you can just kind of find places to be that have kind of a cool vibe, but nobody's there, or it's not really like a legit space. And doing that in other places, you have so many different considerations for that reason. So always think of LA as that magical place where you can kind of do anything.
Yeah, the last show I went to at Modular on the Spot in LA before I moved, it was right at summer of 2021. And we went to the park. It was the park that's in the valley, kind of by Encino, Balboa Park.
Oh yeah.
It was kind of in that area. So when we walked up, like, there's so many people in the park, because people were just getting out in the parks because it was open air, and and so we had our Modular on the Spot next to several bounce houses for quinceañera events.
I believe that.
Then there was a food truck further up that was doing line dancing by the bathrooms. And then you had an entire, because these were on Sundays, you had an entire church congregation in a like a 6x6 grid. And then there were moments where they'd get off their chairs and get down and like pray.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, can we set up next to them?
Yep.
We're like, what? This is like the coolest thing to like, but there were so many things, like, clearly you don't need a permit here, but the fact that all these things were happening because the weather was just so reliable. It is
that's the
one
other
of
thing about LA is there's the diversity of things that could be happening wherever you end up. Is you couldn't even guess usually what it would be, what someone's going to be up to.
Yeah, totally.
Well, and planning shows was super easy, because it was very rare to have any kind of rain between April and November,
Exactly.
But I have to say, my wife and I pulled off one of the coolest things we did with just a lot of the community here, the people that really supported the Modular Synth community in the shows. So I'm like, do you guys remember the comet that was coming out like in earlier this year? There was like, if you stayed up, you could actually see this comet coming in. So I planned this, like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna rent an Airbnb in January in like Shenandoah Park, where it's be dark, right at the time when the comet's coming, where you could see it, and it was a new moon, so there's no, because I love astronomy. I got a huge telescope. I love all this stuff.
Yes.
And I'm like,
dope.
so we're gonna do ambient sense. I'm gonna just have like a couple dozen people. I talked to the Airbnb host, and they were fine with this gathering because it wasn't really a party. I mean, we're all like chill.
Right.
And there's a comet, a new moon, the planets were all aligned.
I remember
And
this.
we were going to do ambient sense. We were going to make chili, and it was going to be cold. And we rented a barn, like a house that had been converted into a house. And I'm like, and I'm planning this 3 weeks in advance, going, I mean, the chances of having a clear sky 3 weeks out, and 2 hours before the sunset, the clouds just opened up.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, this is insane. Like, so we did it. Like, we pulled off this like stargazing, and it got cold, and we went inside the barn, played some music in Chile, and then we went right back outside. Like it was the coolest event that
Wow.
would just be something you would do in LA all the time.
Yes.
And so I left then at the very end, it was getting so cold, and we went in ahead of the chili, and then I came out and there was like ice all over my telescope
Wow.
because it had gotten like sub-freezing temperatures, and
Wow.
so
Wow.
that was pretty cool.
Holy
And
cow. Well, it sounds like you are an amazing host and like event planner, because that would overwhelm most people to have an idea like that and actually pull it off. And
I
always
enjoy
the
it.
idea of
Yeah,
food, I'm like, I'm there.
yeah, that would be. I do. I like bringing people together, and there's just so much to learn. Like there's like a cycle, and which you probably have seen it too. Like every couple years, there's like this new group of people who are really
Yes.
interested, and so there's this constant. Not to say I feel like an elder because I've been doing it now for like 10 years, and I thought I was kind of late getting into it in
Mm-hmm.
2014. But
No.
yeah, I feel like I've told the story and helped people like every other year. It just seems to be a new run of people who just want to either they keep with it or they don't, but at least there is an interest and they come up to the shows and they play, and just seeing someone play a modular set for the first time. I don't, as a host, there's something about that.
Yeah.
Like I just said, like you can't experience doing something first more than once, and so it's like
Wow.
it's such a really great event, like with modular in the mall, and it just seems like that's like you have to play 10 shows to even get into that. But I really like so many people have played that for the first time, and there's something magical about all of that, and then recording it and having that as archived is um it's like I wish I could have the feeling of being at Analog Haven, 10 years ago and not knowing what I'm doing and sweating bullets just because if I look back at it now, I would really be happy with how that turned out. But so
Yeah,
maybe
you
it's kind of
totally
that you
understand.
get a high off your first show, and now I'm just chasing that high for the rest of my
Through
life.
other people, yes. I love that. That makes total sense. Like seeing, I mean, that's like, we don't have kids, so we don't know what that's like, but people say that, you get to see life through, a little person's eyes, all over again, and like that is a rush people get. But yeah,
Yeah.
auroras and ambient is definitely that would be the ultimate. It sort of reminds me of, we're really into surfing, and the idea of chasing the perfect wave, and like this is sort of like that, like chasing the aurora, the perfect aurora for the ambient sesh, because the
Hmm.
auroras are very elusive, if you will.
Oh, um, so this is Ice Locust, right?
Yes,
Try to.
yes, yes, yes. You
I
could
gotta
go.
just. I've never met Jared, but I remember one night. This is how I know Jared, and when I finally meet him in person, it's just going to be the greatest thing because
Yes.
I try to, like, I'm dying to see an aurora. Like, I went to Berlin for the super booth, and then there was like this huge, like another solar flare that came out, and I'm like, and they're like, you might see auroras, and I'm like, oh, it's going to be on the Monday night when I'm on a plane to Berlin. Maybe I'll see auroras on the way to the super booth, and I missed it by a day, and I didn't realize that like the sun rises at like 12:30 in the morning, and I thought it was going to be dark. And like, so I was way off on my time. But I remember with Jared, there was like a surge of auroras coming down into Canada where he lived, and I remember DMing him saying, "Dude, you see like auroras out there at all? Like, just can I vicariously like live through?" And he's like, "Hang on a second," and then he sent this photo of him, and he's got this Eskimo like hood, like with all of like the fur, and it's just like,
Yep.
I'll be right back. And then it was like 30 below, and he went outside just to check if there were auroras for me. So Jared, thank you, because I will never forget that moment when he was like, even not this time around, but we'll get it one day. And it was just so
Oh
funny.
my gosh. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, he's amazing. We have a lot of cosmic conversations about things like that. It's cool to have. It's weird how much this comes up. Like we all love like sound exploration, have come from it from different angles, but gosh, also like super into space stuff. I don't know why that is also a common thread.
Super
But
common,
it just
yeah.
keeps coming up, and I'm like, give me more. Like, what space stuff
Yeah.
do you know?
Did you ever go to Mount Wilson when you were in LA area? The observatory up there?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever visit it? Did you ever go inside or take a look at it or drive up there?
I was a nanny, so I did a lot of that kind of stuff. But I don't think you did.
No,
I think I went by myself with the family.
Yeah, that sounds like one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
So they have
If I'm
this-
not messing that up with something else.
Yeah, well, there's two big observatories. There's one with like a 100-inch telescope, like the diameter of the glass, and there's like a 60-inch one. And every now and then I'm still part of the LA Astronomical Society.
Oh,
I keep up
nice.
with them, and so they have these events where they'll open up to a public for a small group of people, and then you could, with the bigger telescope, there's like 12 things you can see because it's like it just takes forever, then it
Yeah.
locks in,
Wow,
and then you
yeah.
see like amazing things that are like 40 million light years away, and you're like, what?
Yeah,
Um, but
that's hard to comprehend, really.
I was
Yeah.
really wanting to do a show like because they also have these symphonic they'll do like symphony concerts there. And I was right on the edge of being like, I want to do an all synth, like bring
Oh yeah.
modular and just do modular with these telescopes because I stayed up one night with them and like saw all these like amazing things in the sky. And the host was playing all the cliche like Rocket Man
Of
and
course.
like David Bowie, like all this,
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah,
I'm like,
I went
hey,
here with the kids. I don't think you've been. Sorry, I was pulling it up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I've not been.
They
I
have-
know,
it's like
I know I haven't
the
been.
observatory and then their concert schedule. So it's like as you were saying that, it's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's the deal.
it was really cool. And I had asked the host, I'm like, hey, do you mind if you played like this one song on Spotify? It was like my track that I had and on my modular that I just released. It's like, sure, what is it? And I send her the link. Oh my gosh, it was just like the coolest thing to like hearing my music in like the observatory while we're looking at like
Wow.
Triton, which is Neptune's moon, which you really can't see without and there's so few
Huge.
telescopes. Like, 'cause everything now is just it's a computer screen, or you're using telescopes from three different states to triangulate
Mhm.
data. Like, there's nothing else out there that you can just still walk up to the lens and look at.
Yes.
And
Right.
so, yeah, so I was just like, this is so surreal, but I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah.
So let's do this again. Like, totally, of course they say don't touch, like, don't get too close to the walls because they're not OSHA approved and you could like electrocute yourself. But
Oof.
because it was
Holy
what,
cow.
1909 when it was built. But
I know.
hello,
I'm
lovely
not up on my
people.
Mount Wilson facts right now, but we can do a follow up in our Discord about it because observatories are just like after the DC Mall, right? Growing up in that area, having been totally spoiled on the best museums and like the best vibes of like free public spaces, and then moving somewhere else and being like, wait, this isn't how it's gonna be everywhere. That's a real letdown. But LA is like a really close second in my heart to
Yeah.
some of the coolest kind of experiences similar to that. Like obviously the Griffith Observatory is one we went to a million times because everybody always wants to meet for a hike and then you end up, there because
Mhm.
it's in the middle of all of that.
Yeah.
And the combination of like the architecture and the experience of it being astronomy related stuff is always so cool to me because it's not just, oh, I'm at a museum. It's like the space itself gives you that feeling of like, oh, I'm not just like in somebody's house or at a school. Like I am in like a sacred space.
Mm-hmm.
I always feel
Definitely.
that.
Well,
I
there's
was,
two.
They're checking out the seismograph, like to
Oh
see
yeah, they
what
have
the
the
latest
seismograph at the Griffith Observatory.
see what the latest tremor was.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, there's two nerd facts about Mount Wilson, and we can move on. But
Okay, great.
the one is that's where we discovered that the Milky Way was not the universe. The Milky Way was just a very small galaxy compared to everything. Like
Oh, I
that's
see
when
what
they
you're saying.
realized, like by looking at Andromeda, that it was actually coming closer to us, and that was not a part of the Milky Way. And it was like, oh, we're even smaller than we thought. And then the other observation was they discovered Pluto at that observatory.
Oh,
So
Whoa.
I
yeah,
mean,
so when
those
I
are
look at the
huge.
lens, yeah. So when I'm looking at this eyepiece, I'm just like, it's weird. Like you get all that historical, when you know that history, and you're just like, I'm standing where legends have stood.
And
So
and to think about when that happened to now, to how much more we know now in such a short time, the acceleration of that.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
I can barely keep up. I feel like every day there's like 3 new discoveries minimum from the JWST at least. Of like, we found another, we broke another thing we thought we knew. That's not true anymore. Like every day, I can't even keep up anymore.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
it's really wild. It is hard to keep up because there's so much going on.
Well, yeah, because there's other stuff to distract you. But I was seeing that they discovered that where sort of like they're looking at the Big Bang basically is kind of my like way, my shorthand for saying like they're traveling. It's the telescope is traveling and it's seeing further and further back in time. And they said the other day that they now know that the universe was not always transparent. You couldn't always see through it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That the gases were so in such a way that it was like there was a time when it was opaque, and then there was a time when it's transparent. Like there's like a line in the sand, of that. And they're like, they found that spot in time. Like
They found the border.
I don't even know what I'm saying, honestly.
They found the border of
so wild.
transparent and opaque universe. Galaxy.
So it just sort of
Wow.
like, it opens up your mind to thinking about things differently. And that's how I feel about modular.
Mm-hmm. Well, like I know when I lived in LA, I would like take the telescope out in the backyard and would do this amazing generative like ambient patch, open the windows, play it while I was and at the time this was the whole, if you're up in the space, this is so nerdy, but when Betelgeuse the star, they were like, is it gonna explode? Is it gonna blow up? It's like it's the shoulder of Orion, and it's like, is this the moment? And because it's gonna be, when it blows up, it's gonna be brighter than the moon for like
Yes.
months, and it's gonna change like everyone's opinions of of just our species and everything. And just watching that actually like fade away, like get really dim and then bright again, like that whole moment in time while I was playing ambient music was really trippy. But
Wow.
Yeah, I imagine.
watching like them trying to figure out what was going on, then realizing, oh well, it's might be in the next 100,000 years, and you're like, oh okay. Well,
Yeah, the concept of time when you're doing astronomy stuff, space stuff, whatever. Just sort of like I can't grab onto anything. Just like incomprehensible. But then when somebody like Carl Sagan can put things in a way that you feel like you understand. I think that's such an art and such a gift
Right.
to humanity to help us think differently about. Ooh, what are we pointing at? What do we?
Oh, I was gonna say, speaking of
We got
space and
some
aliens,
action.
I think I'm making. I
Oh.
kicked this on at the beginning of our session here, and there might be an alien
It's starting to glow.
blob that kind of appears in my lava lamp here.
It's getting a little action now.
It hears
It's
us.
like a weird clock, like
That's true.
it's when that starts
Yeah.
bubbling, I know I need to go to bed.
There you go. Yeah, it's time to turn it off. That's how
As
I know.
soon as it
That's-
starts getting cool, it's like, well, I have to turn this off now. I'm gonna burn my house down.
And this one's like massive. Like I have a smaller one here on the right, which is
that one's going. That one's popping.
that one's like, hey, you want this? And this guy back here is just like 4 hours, and it
Yeah, you have
finally.
to literally like right as you wake up and the sun comes up, you have to turn it on to get it going.
Totally. Oh yeah, this is my kind of
Yeah,
my production.
let's do a synth review.
Oh, okay. Now this is
No
yeah.
pressure.
So I work for Noise Engineering, modular manufacturer, been around for about 10 years. The Basimilus Ateritas altar is like the dominant. That was the one that put noise engineering on the map. Um, and I worked with them for a while doing their demos for like the videos and all that. I started working with them full time. I actually left LA, moved to DC, and then started working for noise engineering remotely. So I do go back to
Wow.
LA once a year. We have like this summit where we kind of come together and talk about everything, which is really cool. But I've taken this room and that's like my production. So if you ever go to Noise Engineering's Instagram and you see like this is the case, usually I have this you always see this case,
Mm-hmm.
which is a black hole case, and so many people are like, dude, where you get that case? I'm like, well, there's also gear you can look at, but
Yeah, I know. People love to
but
point
yeah,
out the case.
I got the black hole case, which is really nice. I just love it's like a 60
Yeah,
HP and then two rows.
it's
But
perfect.
so yeah, if you go to the Instagram, you'll see like this is the table that I do a lot of that on. This is my patch for Boston. I'm playing the Mott's in Boston this
All
weekend.
right.
So I was just kind of going over a little bit of that. But yeah, this is the like the camera up top. I have two cameras up top. So
Ooh,
when you
nice.
get two cameras and do editing, it's amazing because it just makes everything so much faster. Highly recommend. Then there's this other weird thing
Yeah,
here, which is supposed to be for the iPhone to do vertical video. So we can be all hip and
got
cool to
to.
TikTok.
Got to. We are all just a slave to the aspect ratio.
Yeah. But I mean, as far as like, hang on, there we go. As far as other gear, I mean, I have this beast over here.
Oh, the actual synth reveal is happening.
Yeah, like
Amazing. I love
there's
that.
that's my gas right there.
Oh, wow.
That's
Yes.
that was my reason for I would avoid LA traffic and go to Analog Haven all the time. And as a result of that, that
Oops.
happened. And with my wife being across the country, that happened. And then like I get that and then realize there is a thing called gas. And then I realized I was probably the poster child. And so I've been trying to slim down ever since. But what are you gonna do? It was better than like
I want to
drinking my
literally see a
life
poster
like
with
a
you on it
bar,
now. It says, have gas.
Yes.
Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, so that's kind of cool. But that's it's really more of just a holding place because I really like I like playing the smaller cases. There's just gives me a chance, and maybe it's because of all the just like doing demo videos, and I really have to learn 100% of a module before because I have to be the one to tell everyone else like have to train the
Yeah.
trainers, and so it's like I learn like how often do you really learn your equipment 100%? Like it's so rare.
Yeah.
So when I do get a small case like this and I can play it for a half an hour and do really interesting things with it, a lot of it's just because I figure out how to do four or five things with it. And because I know 100% versus 10% of everything. So it is fun to play and it's challenging to do small cases um, but it really forces you to kind of go under the hood and figure out exactly what everything. I learned that for the first time with the mutable instruments peaks. Is it peaks? Yeah, the drum module. It was a like a drum, an LFO, a sequencer, all at the same time, and I never went through the modes ever. And so I started to learn with that one, like, oh, I can do LFOs as well as drums and just click this thing. And then it had like a Easter egg in it that did weird voices. So I was in the middle of my patch, I would just kind of like one of the earlier times I was playing, I would just hit this like mode and this weird like people talking and very vocodery sounds were coming out of it, and this everybody's like, "What? How did you do that?" I'm like, "It's an Easter egg. I don't know, but I wouldn't have learned what that was had I not just forced myself to figure it out because I was working with a small case. So I encourage if the manuals are easy to read, there's some modules that are really tough no matter what, no matter how many times you print out the manual, but definitely worth it, just to kind of dig in and figure it out because it's like I was talking about the MS-10 in the beginning, like I just learned new things from this just a couple of years ago, and I've had it since I was 13. Like, how is
Wow.
that possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
I'm a manual reader. I recommend it as well. I think it's great to get deep on stuff.
It the limitations is something we talk about a lot, and the idea of having a different rig for playing live than you have in your studio space, and how that informs like the decisions you make and kind of like the fun of playing live. How much are you pre-planning for your live set, especially for modular on the spot?
well, in the beginning, I was playing it like a trained classical pianist. Like I would, take it and just work it every second to where it was just the rehearsal staging, just everything was just I didn't I was so nervous that I just thought, well, like when I was a kid playing piano, if you played it this exact same way all the time, then you didn't get nervous because you had that process. So I was starting by doing that. And I remember doing 2 or 3 shows where you could like put them side by side and play, and they were almost exactly the same. And that was a really good exercise on just trying to understand timing of anything. Cause I think nowadays I kind of know when 15 minutes is or 20 minutes is. Like
Yeah.
I'm not always staring at a clock when I'm playing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then but then you're not reading the room. You're not really experimenting. You're not preparing yourself for the mistakes that always happen. I mean, I've played out probably almost 100 times now. And I look forward to the mistake because it gives me a chance to like pull myself out of it. And there's that adrenaline from doing that. So I think
Hmm.
nowadays it's kind of a half patched thing. So,
Hmm.
like for this case for Boston, I've got like 6 different voices and I have a rough idea of how they're going to mix and mingle. But until I sit down and listen to the crowd and kind of sense what it is, I'm not sure where I'm going to take it. So I don't want to be stuck to a certain cadence at
Mm-hmm.
all. I
Mm-hmm.
played in New York last year for the New York Modular Society,
Oh, cool.
and I never played in New York, always wanted to, and I got invited up, and I brought a 2 row case, and I was going to do something kind of like cinematic, but then like the people before me, like they would just squelch on some filters and just get really raw, and the New York crowd was like, do it. And I'm just like, oh, they're not gonna like what I'm gonna bring. Like
Oh
I'm doing
no.
soundtrack stuff. So I got up there and I'm like, but that you could just tell they were wanting to be interrupted. Like they want that. And I had my patch set at like 100 BPM, and the first thing I did when
Wow.
I started my set was like, I just spun my PAMs up to 140 and said, I don't know what's gonna happen. So I just listen to the crowd and I just started doing a lot of squelchy stuff that was I'd never rehearsed this whole thing ever. I just deconstructed my patch how I thought it was going to be, because usually like the night before I'll record it what I think I'm going to play, and then I'll listen to it throughout the day just to kind of remind myself of like, oh, this is the path. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's weird, like sometimes when you're just listening to your own patch it helps you remember where you need to go. Like
True.
if you can kind of like say, okay, I think this is what I'm going to do next, and you do it, you're like, oh yeah. So that it is a weird way of rehearsing if you can't be by your gear all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I listened to that patch before I went to New York. I'm like, that is exactly not how it turned out,
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
it felt great. Like, because I wanted to. It was all really about the crowd interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And then at the very end of the case, they were so pumped up that at the very end of the case, I just like, and you can see the video on my YouTube channel. I just picked up my case and I was just like, I started pulling the cables. And so you would just hear this like, it's just like pulling apart. And then I held it up like it was my kill, like, "Yeah." And then people were like, oh, what's this? It was really cool. I'd never rehearsed it. I didn't know. It just you get a feeling based on the crowd of what you want to do. So I ruined my performance mixer because I pulled it. When you're not planning on that and you suddenly start doing things like pulling out cables, it was so I need to get that repaired still. But that was like, but it's a story that I'll remember because it was just like
Yeah.
I
getting
mean,
caught in the
clearly, I
moment.
was gonna say that sounds epic, and it clearly was. And that mindset of having had so much experience playing live with your own rig and knowing how much to pre-plan and how to even leave yourself open is an art in itself. We all talk about this so much, of how to prepare for live shows when you're so used to having everything at your fingertips in your home studio, and you can change things as much as you want or move things around as much, have all the things, and how to figure out how to I don't know, I'm just thinking about, we had a conversation with Sarah Bell Reed about this, and she got really specific with us about it. It was like really cool to hear her processing through that, similar to how we're talking now. And it's just like a totally different mindset to want to serve the moment and the people that are there with you than it is to be in your own head, and you're literally like in your headphones, in your space, having the feedback experience for yourself is completely different than what you're describing. So yeah, it's cool to have different outlets from the same, different outputs from the same input.
Well, I learned I learned my lesson on that really early, which was helpful. So I think it was my second performance I was playing, and I was doing what I thought I was doing, and then suddenly, like, I did this thing where I kind of did a drop, and I pulled my hand, and it pulled the cable that was clocking my gear. And when you're in rehearsal, you never pull out your clock source ever. So I'm just playing, and all of a sudden I was like, yeah, and it goes, and I'm just like, no. And of course, when you pull your hand so fast, the cable just like flops over where you can't see it, and I'm like,
Oh,
and then
yes.
all of a sudden you're just like, okay, here comes the sweat, and everybody's staring at you. And like my second performance, though, and I'm just so I'm like, okay, just grab some CV, just start doing some wah wah wah, and just kind of like it was intentional, and like what happened, then I saw the empty cable. I'm like, okay, it goes somewhere. What is this? And I was still like taking a filter and doing these really low end war like I meant it, and I just like popped it in and went bah, 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 bah. And I'd start jamming. I'm like, oh my gosh, and afterwards I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I pulled the clock out of it. And my friend goes, dude, I thought that was totally intentional. I thought you were like, fuck this, I'm pulling the clock and I'm just gonna grind to come back. And like, oh, so
Like
yes, it was intentional. Yeah,
Exactly.
so that kind of like reminded me to say, just like when mistakes happen, just like play with that mistake a little bit and see if you can pull yourself back out, because if you can successfully do that, like that's an adrenaline rush that you just wasn't expecting, and it's amazing when you can do it, And so I learned a lot of lessons just from that. And of course, you can't ever rehearse that, no matter what. There's still things that happen in a performance now that you think of how many hours we put in this thing, and there's still things that happen. So
I know,
yeah,
that's the absolute rush that I love.
Yeah, leaning into, like, if you hit a wrong note, like I play bass guitar as well, and like if I hit a wrong note or something, that's the scale we're playing in now for a little bit, That's what's happening. And then you just kind of go back into whatever you're doing. And it's all about the way that you portray whatever, you're doing. Like if you have a look on your face like, I just shat the bed, people are going to think that's the case. But if you sell it, it's going to feel good for everybody.
Yeah, it's huge to boost your confidence, because then you feel like, if I can do that, I can do it again, and I can do it again.
Exactly.
And it's also letting go, like, because I was training myself so much to feel like it was a classical performance, and it just feels so much great to do something a little more half patched and feel it out. And that's because there was also a moment when I was playing on Mott's where I think it was one of the last Mott's, and we were down the LA River, and I'm playing my set like predictably, and then all of a sudden, like, there was like 150 people on this kind of on this when you're down the river, there's these, what do you call it, where everybody's the
slope.
Angle, the slope. Yeah, they're all just like, it's like a little
amphitheater. The river rises.
Yeah,
the wall.
So people were sitting on the wall, and all of a sudden it got dark, and I just saw these flashlights in like in the distance coming, like two or three flashlights. And I'm playing my predictive set, and then Bana Hafar was there. So she comes up to me, she taps me while I'm performing. I'm like, oh no. She goes, "Hey, can you like play like 10 minutes more? I'm gonna take care of the cops that are coming down, and we got to figure this out." I'm like, sure. And I wasn't prepared for that. Like I had my
Oh, you
box
had your
of what I
set.
wanted to do.
Hmm.
So then I figured out a way to kind of bring back the intro a little bit and then like reverse that. And so it ended kind of quiet. But I had to learn how to extend my set as I was performing, and I had never done that before. But um, she took care of the cop issue, and I think after that they moved the venue to somewhere else because at that point there were so many people coming that
Yeah.
uh, it was creating a hazard because of all the cars that were parked on
Hmm.
the road, and there was like train tracks there, and it was like
Yeah,
LA.
it's not meant for a crowd to be gathering.
So yeah, so that's
Wow.
no matter what, you're always going to find something that you weren't expecting, and it's cool. Or like the circadian rhythms, the one here that's with the green lights. Like I play in the my studio, which is dark and like this setting quite a bit, and then when you go out to a mott, it's sun's bright, and I just remember when I first brought that out, I'm like, dun, 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 dun. Like I'm trying to hide
Yes.
the sun to see the lights. I'm like, this is like the worst performance because you're just like grooving. There's sun, you're just like, what? Grooving, what?
That is so
I was
funny.
constantly doing that.
Those like really unexpected. Thank you, Noise, for finding the link.
Oh,
Um,
sweet.
just
Thank you.
man, just like all the different variables that you wouldn't think about. Like you've just nailed them, and I love all your stories. These moments that you can't forget because they changed your perspective on how you were even creating. That's so freaking cool. Not everybody would take those experiences and like use them to evolve.
Yeah, you're like
Yeah.
Just, like, shut
remembering the
down
show
more.
by the mistake. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, so much can be learned from that. And then
Yeah.
I hear other, and then I hear people go through because everyone's going to go through that in some form,
Mm-hmm.
And so when I'm at a show and that happens to somebody, it's for me to sit there and say, hey, this is very common, and
Mm.
what can you take away to build from that instead of it being, something that depresses you. It's like take that as an opportunity to change your style even or do something because, and it was so funny because after that, I started actually stopping the clock a little more because it's so hard in modular.
Mm.
Like when someone stops the clock, they're always like, what's going on? Because it's always this pattern. And so I started getting to a point where I was like pausing
Mm.
and then like physically doing something to kind of create that next motion, like as a performer. Like I'm not a navel worshiper. Like I don't just sit down and just do this and here we are. Like I really like to be a little animated when I play because I think it enhances it a little bit. Um, so that by stopping the clock, people are like, "What's happening? Is there a mistake? Is it broken?" And then you go into this motion, and it makes that next step even more theatrical and more exciting because
Ooh.
you've you've you got the attention,
Mm-hmm.
and then they look at you, and then you do something that's really kind of cool. So that's always fun. So I learned a lot just from that
Yeah.
mistake. Like it actually became a part of how I perform now because I turned
Oh,
it
I can
around.
totally relate to that. When you improvise and then something happens and you're like, oh no, I'm keeping that now. That's one of my favorite things. Um, Connecticut. That's a really good question about Toto, who's also in the Boston area. Another synth friend of ours who is probably playing something or is connected into this. We'll have to check in with her and see if there's a tie-in with these shows we're talking about, because we just want everybody to meet.
Yeah, for sure.
Um,
Yeah, I haven't been to Boston in 10 years, so
Oh,
it'll
wow.
be good. And I was there for like some social media conference, so
Oh, yeah,
definitely
it's
not
definitely
people
different.
I would meet.
Yeah,
Well, my
what?
friend Colin Russell, who used to work for Qubit, and then he worked for Instruo, and then now he is like a instructor at the Berklee College of Music.
Oh, okay.
So it'll be good seeing him again because I remember being at my first NAMM show and he was working for Qubit, and I'm like, what is this like amazing candy store of all these sounds, and walking around like had no idea what to expect because it's Anaheim. There's like so many
Yes.
manufacturers. And I
It's a
remember
wild
Colin just in the distance
experience.
going, POB, yay. It's like, oh my gosh, someone who recognized me. This is great. So it'll be good to like see him again now that he's kind of gone through so many changes in his career, and he's getting married in like a couple weeks, which is cool. So
Oh.
it'll be nice to catch up. But he's like the only one I really know in Boston, other than Richard, who runs the Mott's Boston, and there's a couple other performers who actually came down for my show
Mm-hmm.
uh, last year. So it's neat to see the other organizers come into our shows and try to. I mean, the Northeast, there's so many cities that are not too far away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's good that we're all like the Baltimore, like DC Baltimore is now I get it. You know, I don't understand
Mm-hmm.
why the two cities had so like they're not the same. Like Baltimore and DC are actually further away than Dallas and Fort Worth, but Dallas and Fort Worth is a city where
Oh,
if
I
you
never
put
thought about
Baltimore and
that.
DC together, I mean, it's not the same
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
at all.
No.
I mean, Fort Worth is a little more cowboy hat, a little more Western, where Dallas is a little more, technological hub. But
Mm-hmm.
the
I never
difference
thought of
between
that.
Baltimore and DC is really a lot. So, but
Yeah.
there's a good like the I love the Baltimore scene because it's more of a late night industrial
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
kind of feel,
Exactly.
where DC feels more family. And I like having both the kind of be in
Yeah, it's a
a
great
playground.
place to have access to both of those communities, and also Philly's not that far either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
You
point.
don't have to go all the way to New York and Boston. There's a
Although
lot.
they're not
There's
far.
quite
Yeah.
yeah. Toto is playing New England. Oh yes, the New England Synth Fest is at the Planetarium in
Oh,
Boston,
cool.
which is like a dream of ours to play a planetarium. Also Triobium, we talk about that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. We know, yeah, the New England area has a lot going on with Ash. His Quiet is in Massachusetts, Western Mass. Toto, we know,
Hmm.
is in the Boston area, and Mott's is going on there, and yeah, so
Oh,
definitely,
yeah.
it's popping off.
Yeah, Richard's at Synth Cube. That's cool. Yeah, he runs the Boston shows.
Oh,
Um,
SynthCube is a great name for a local synth shop. Just the
yeah.
idea that there's local synth shops, popping up too, outside of just LA and San Francisco, um, is so exciting.
Although I did take a trip to Sweetwater, which is close to where you are,
Oh yes,
Fort
what
Wayne.
were you passing through for some reason?
Well, our company, Noise Engineering, recently is in their stores or in their store.
Oh,
Uh,
you went there for that reason. That makes so much
so I
sense.
went
I saw that.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did like a 30-minute video on kind of our gear and walked through, which is you kind of show up, and I was expecting kind of a Q&A thing, like, well, here you go. I'm like, okay. And I just kind of went through, you know, who we were and all that. Then I did a
Were you on the
presentation with
stage in
sales.
the theater?
Yeah, that was, yeah, that
It's a little.
I
It's
was
like a
used to the
college lecture
TED.
hall. Yeah.
Yeah, very, I mean, it's even bigger than like TED Talk because
Yeah, yeah,
the
and like the
screen was
most high
just
tech
massive.
that they're everything that exists they have it. So like that space is like more high tech than it needs to be. It's really cool.
Yeah, just like the wireless mics and they took my keynote presentation with the remotes, and there was the stage, and the sound system was great. Like in the middle of my in the middle of my presentation, I was doing some low end stuff, and I just the whole stage was floor was vibrating. I'm like, hang on a second, I just got to feel this. This is amazing,
Yeah, it's
all the
similar.
sales guys are like, whatever, we've seen this before. They're so used to it. I'm like, you're used to this,
Yeah.
but it was a really cool time. Like, I get it. Now that I've been there, I understand the culture and the friendliness and just that the passion there. It's really a cool place. So, and I love Perfect Circuit. Obviously, we met each
Oh
other
yeah.
through David, so
Yeah. So cool.
yeah, it's like I just like that there's more places that are getting interest in the gear that we put out.
Yeah, it's almost like we could create like a map of the US that's just synth, modular synth, stuff like a handbook or something.
Mod maps.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Like, can somebody come up with something quippy here for me?
That's what you're getting at, though, right?
Yeah,
like
tangents.
Kind of a map of all the places.
If you walk into Sweetwater, they just start throwing candy at you.
I didn't eat any candy there.
No candy.
No candy.
Well,
But
they also have like a restaurant and a coffee shop and all kinds of things going on.
They had like an arcade corner where all the games were free, so I just played Galaga. Like,
oh, that makes sense. Yeah,
That was
it's like I was gonna say it's like a toy store for gear, but it's not. It's more like Disney World.
yeah, and they have an academy. Well, this is not a commercial for them.
Yeah, I
but,
know. We don't care, but it's cool.
yeah, yeah, they just have an academy. Like, they really have.
Yeah, like recording studios
Found
and,
great
like, and
ways.
classes and little kid classes or college level or whatever. It's just like boom, boom, just keeps growing more and more. Even
No,
since
really,
we've been
this
here.
is not an ad.
It's not an ad at
No.
all. We know we're all doing it, but
No affiliation. Seriously.
we just happen to be close enough that we kind of have
Oh, so close.
Kinda
As close
have-
as you could possibly get, really.
kind of have a sense of what it's like. Have been there, so
That's cool.
yeah, they have a lot.
It's
going on.
amazing how little we have been there, though, considering that we live here.
Well, it's sort of like LA, right? If you live in one part of town in LA, you're never seeing anyone from another part. Like, we don't want to leave.
It's
If
that,
the drive
yeah.
is annoying, It's like, oh, I live in Highland Park. My friends are moving to Culver City. Like, it's like they're moving to, like, Australia. Like, I'm not going to see them again. So that's how, even though we live in a smaller town, it's still that way here.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, east, like, it's over kind of on the west side, and, like, unless you live over there, you're never going over there. There's no need to. There's no reason. And it's like, if something takes more than 15 minutes to drive around here, people are like, what? I don't have time for that.
Definitely
Right.
that
So-
kind of a place. Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's there. Everybody has a Sweetwater person. Yeah,
We know
that's
about
the
it.
thing. Yeah, everybody's got a Sweetwater Connect.
But I have to say, my favorite presentation though was at Perfect Circuit, because when I was doing demos for noise engineering, we had like a whiskey pairing with our modules thing,
Oh.
Ooh.
and there's a video of it. And so
As I drink. Awesome.
yeah, we talked about the curses and the manus and the similus, and and then by the time it got to me, I was showing off the 5U modules. That there's like a handful of 5U modules. So that was a bigger module, and of course I was the last presenter, so everybody was pretty, because you get like a whiskey, like, here's curses. It's a very it's a wavetable, and here's the whiskey that goes with this, kind of a smoother type of whiskey.
Oh,
And
that's
then
so
you get
awesome.
the Manus, which was more aggressive, and then okay, here's the whiskey, and so all the people would get a little serving of this. So by the time it got to me, and I was the last person, so I'm like, good, because I can be as ridiculous as I want, because it's the last
That's
person.
amazing.
Everybody's kind of
They're
ride.
3 sheets.
So so I had done the Manus Ateritas Magnus, which is the 5U, and the whiskey had bacon in it. So there was like this hard
Oh, I believe
liquor
that.
with bacon, and so I'm trying to do this demo, having not really even played with 5U a whole lot, while drinking this whiskey, and everybody else was having this whiskey. Yeah, that was amazing.
That's
that I even
really
pulled
cool.
off.
Yeah, you're not doing that at Sweetwater.
No, by far. No.
Oh, man, yeah.
No. Oh my gosh.
No shade. Yeah.
Lots of yeah. Lots of Sweetwater love. Yeah, our studio is in Sweetwater's. No, that would be insane. They have some pretty awesome studio setups there though.
Yeah, the place is ridiculous.
I think you can use. Yeah, we got to tour that one. They had just opened like a new recording studio space that was just freaking gorgeous, that you can rent out. Like anybody could just rent out as like a band to record for the day or whatever, and like you can use like an engineer of theirs. But yeah, the rooms are just...
It like doubles as a showroom.
It's like
so
they're
it always
beautiful,
has the
top of the
newest
line,
stuff.
newest, all of the best, Neve stuff and everything. Unreal. Bacon whiskey.
Yeah,
I know, I'm hungry for bacon all of a sudden.
Yeah, it's cool when shops pay attention to this, because I think it does go a long way.
Yeah, well, that's really the thing. Like, the idea of the mod maps, right? There's the modular on the spot sort of level community driven things. There's the small shops, like that whole, like, it goes hand in hand. These sort of, like I said earlier, DIY kind of communities, like anything non-Sweetwater, basically, where it requires community support for these shops to even exist outside of LA and New York. So we definitely want to promote that as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Because that's really the heart of it for us is, like you said, just like having the opportunity to walk into a space and be like, what even is this? And everyone's just like, yeah, let's talk about it. What do you know? What's your skill level? What's your knowledge level? Like, there's not that expectation that you should know it. It's about wanting to share the knowledge and grow the community, like you were saying before. It's just warms my heart. Makes me
and
so
seeing
happy.
all that, like, after the mod shows, that was the coolest part, was when people finished playing. Everybody comes up, okay, let me see the gear, and how'd you make this work? And it's just like that conversation, because I have a permit here in DC, it's like I gotta cut it off after a certain time. There was one time we just kept talking, and a wedding, like a florist came up. She's like, I ain't waiting any longer. She came up and just started dropping flowers while we're trying to do our synth. I'm like, okay, I think we need to
No,
go.
yeah, we're not not good with ending anything, right? Don't want it ever to end. Speaking of which, definitely want to make sure everybody knows that we've been dropping your links. You can always use the command guest on our Synth Friends nights to get the links here. So we've got your YouTube, your Instagram, and your Bandcamp. Those are going to be the best places. Everybody should go there immediately after this. And obviously we got that link before, but I think that was also from your YouTube of that performance from New York Modular Society. So everyone have fun enjoying those videos. And if you have any last questions for Patrick, we're going to wrap this up because I'm very bad at ending things, so I'm trying to create
We got the wedding
space.
coming. We gotta.
Yeah, I know. The florist is coming in. They're kicking us out. That's like such a famous phrase for like DIYers is they're kicking us out. Hurry, they're kicking us out. Put that on a t-shirt. Oh
awesome.
Gosh, BLT Bacon LFO. That got me.
Ooh.
That was a good one, Triobium.
Yeah, someone at one of the Rhizome shows, I never heard of it. He had a module where you could put dirt in it, and then there's like the radioactive or whatever the chemicals are, and you get a little moist, whatever, and there's like it takes signals from the dirt and applies it to some sort of a trigger pattern or some sort of a noise generator. It was like fascinating.
Have you heard of this?
No.
I need to know more about this.
That's cool.
And he was like, well, this is the dirt from Edgar Allan Poe's grave. And we're just like...
Which is in Baltimore.
So I believe him because, of course, yeah, local... but still,
local
it's
lore.
Like, that's pretty cool. You can
That's
put
creepy.
dirt in a module. All right.
Oh, I have so many questions about that now. All right, I know what I'll be Googling tonight in bed while I'm pretending to go to sleep. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being with us. I do want to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Dave Soto, Colorado Modular Synth Society, repping the merch. We love it. We love to see it. So in case you didn't know, when we were in Berlin for Super Booth, It wasn't even, a super booth was over. It was like the day after, and we were just trying to meet up with as many people as we could before we had to leave.
Soak it all
and
in. Yeah.
we were able to connect with Dave Soto, and he was like, oh, my friend Patrick's is about to leave for the airport, and I want to say goodbye to him, and you have to meet each other. So we literally met as you were getting into your Uber to leave for the airport. It was like, hi, bye, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
We'll see you on Synth Friends.
Like 60 seconds at the most, you know, and I'm just like, this was cool. So I'm glad that we worked it out. And you having all the DC connections, like with what we're doing, like how cool is that it all just
so wild.
Works out.
Yeah. So this was wonderful, and I really appreciate you being here and giving your time to us so we could ask you a million questions. But make sure if you're in the Boston area, it's this coming weekend.
Yeah, it's on Saturday.
This Saturday for Modular on the Spot. I'm sure anybody who's in the area who's into Modular already knows about it and is telling us about it, but just double check.
Sounds
and
like
then,
mandatory.
Is it the weekend after that you'll be doing the Modular on the Spot for the Juneteenth weekend?
Yeah, so that'll be June 17th here on the National Mall, and then we'll have another show June 24th, same place. And then we're kind of taking off July and August because it just gets so hot.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no way. There's too many patriotic parades and events, and then it gets super hot.
Yeah, and plus when it gets hot, then the storms kind of come in,
exactly.
And like the chances of that are greater. And we did an evening show last year and really liked it. It felt so formal because it was and people were going out. It's 7:00. We need to go out and see. And DC loves, like, you got the Lincoln Center, you have all these places here. So people do like going out for a night out, and it had just a different vibe than just a Sunday afternoon. So we're kind of mixing up the dates, kind of mixing up the times. Cool. So we have a September show. Well, we have an October show. We might do 2 in October. I have a second date in case there's like a rain out, but I kind of want to make it its own show because we've had a lot of people wanting to play.
Yeah, I bet.
And there's like a whole new cycle of new people who just want to get out. And it's the community is growing, and it's really great to see. So between the part shortages kind of going away and the communities coming out, and just everybody is just exploring this constantly, and it's a really good time to be a part of all of that. So if it wasn't for the community, I wouldn't be doing this. So I'm really happy that I'm able to provide a place for people to play for their first time or their 100th time. You know, it's just really a lot of fun. So
yeah. Well, we really appreciate that about you, and anyone who's in the DC area, make sure you get connected with Modular on the Mall people. Patrick himself, you know, I would imagine that you are open in your DMs open.
Oh yeah, always.
Always. Yeah. DMs are open. So yes, Tangent, we are glad Patrick is in DC as well and doing what you're doing. Yeah, it's always, you know, like, as much as I sometimes have FOMO about, oh, there's something happening in San Diego tonight or whatever, like, place, you can't be everywhere. It just, at least I know that it's all happening, you know, and that people are, like you said, it's growing, and I can just go to bed at night knowing that there's so much community thriving and supported, and that we're gonna make this map. We're gonna just have to make the tour guide of all the spots and all the people. Check me out on Bandcamp. Awesome.
A synth overlay over Google Maps.
Yes.
Great.
Oh my God, that's so brilliant. This is gonna happen now. I love it. Synth Friends. Yes. Awesome. Well,
hey.
So amazing. I feel like we could just talk for hours and hours, and this would turn into whiskey, and then bacon, and then who knows? We'd be stargazing.
Playing with 5U. Like, what's going on?
I know.
Breakfast. Might as well cook some eggs.
Might as well cook some eggs while we're stargazing. Yeah. So I look forward to, just how our paths continue to cross, and hopefully get to, make some noise in a space together someday as part of this.
Yeah, if you go, might be going to NobCon this year, I'm not sure, but if you're going to NobCon, I'll see you there.
Oh, definitely. We'll have to expand on our 60-second hang at NobCon.
Yeah, maybe we'll do 2 minutes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've booked our stuff. I was going to say we'll definitely be there, but I never want to say that about anything. But we did book all of our stuff, so we are planning to go.
It's likely.
It is planned, so we look forward to, hopefully you'll get to go too, and then we can hang.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we'll see you around the interwebs, and look forward to all the videos from your upcoming stuff.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. It's fun. And yeah.
Nice to meet you,
If
Patrick.
anybody has any questions or anything,
Yes.
just let me know, because it's always cool to meet new people online and real life, however it works. We're always here to help.
Heck yeah. That's amazing to hear. Yay, lots of love in the chat. Well, we'll have to have you on again for sure. Have a great evening.
Okay, see you later.
See ya.
Gosh, this is such a lively crew tonight. I'm sorry if I didn't get to everybody's questions or comments, but you all are amazing. Oh my gosh, Mr. X is here just as we say goodbye to our synth friend.
It's the perfect
Mr. X
time to
shows
come.
up. Thank you for the 9 months of subs. That was amazing timing. This is us actually. These are all just for Patrick. All these emotes. The emote explosion. Thank you to everyone who was here and everyone who recommended Patrick to us. We really appreciate you just being the cool people that you are, and
What a fun convo.
just being so kind and open. I mean, I've been involved in some communities in the past that are not modular related, that's not how people are, you know? So I don't want to take that for granted, that everyone is so kind and generous and open and just like sharing synth friendships with each other. So that means a lot to us. Yeah, I feel like, so I have like the joy of getting to rewatch these so that I can reshare them. And this is like, I feel like I missed, like, so much of what we talked about was so deep, and I want to like rewatch and really soak it up again, even though it just happened. So I'll try not to overanalyze that.
That's a good sign.
Yeah, I'm glad you enjoyed it, Obama Sweet Man. Yeah, welcome in, Mr. X. For you get to be here for our debrief of the Synth Friends and post green room sort of hang, right? And I'm trying to think. Oh, that's right. So because we didn't do movie night last week, we'll probably just watch the movie we were supposed to watch this week.
That makes sense.
Who said you didn't catch the... Yeah, you're a lurker. We know. You've got multiple screens open. It's fine. But man, I got really like lit up again for the idea of like planetariums and playing
Absolutely.
in spaces that are round. That's really the goal for me. Is...
What is your appeal to spaces that are around?
Are you asking that so that I'll say it? Because you should already know.
Asking that as maybe like a refresher / so you can say it.
You saw Tangerine Dream at a planetarium. I mean, that's who really probably is the inspiration for us wanting to do it anyway. I like round things for the sound, but also because... Right, how can I say this? So... Like, the idea of rectangles and grids, I feel like, is made up, and that circles are actually the only true shape. I don't want to get any deeper than that. Triangles count too, but I think that circles are a way to subvert the patriarchy, and so we can get into that in Discord if you want to talk about that kind of stuff. I try not to bring that to the synth chat too much, because I don't want to get people riled up for no reason, because that's not really what it's about for me. It's more like something that lifts me up to think about, not something I'm angry about. But
I didn't mean to open up a can of worms.
But yeah, that's how I feel about circles. And specifically, I got that idea from living in D.C. So trying not to freak out too much on Patrick about the idea that he found a place that is round to do this in when the imposing structures in D.C. like make you think that way about things if you really stop to zoom out. But I don't want to get into that.
Trippy.
Anyway, that's a personal theory that I have that nobody else needs to care about, but if you do, it is a can of worms, and I'm happy to talk about it.
I just thought you liked circles.
I do. When
I was expecting you to just say that.
Circles. No, like playing in the round. So like my experience with music is from classical training, but for performing is from doing theater. And like the first theater I did was in the round. And so when you're like a kid doing theater and they're like, it's going to be theater in the round, they taught us what theater of the round meant and like the history of it and like Shakespeare and different types of stages, you know. They all have different names. And I don't remember all of them, but like, you know, your traditional stage, that's not like the only kind of stage, right? You can have a stage that comes out like it's kind of like what Taylor Swift is doing on her tour, where it comes out, that has a name, so like people can be on the sides. It feels kind of like theater in the round, but it's just that platform and people around it.
Like
or
a catwalk?
fully in the round, yeah. But not all catwalks allow you to sit at the round part. You know what I mean?
You
might just be on the side.
I'm just throwing
you might
words
not be
out
at the
there.
end.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, obviously I'm gonna make a Taylor Swift reference at least once in a stream.
I mean, you know, it's just... I'm not going to do it today.
I mean, she's...
not doing it tonight.
She's very publicly performing on a stage that's designed like that, so it's hard for me not to think about it.
Right.
But yeah, so learning about that at a young age got me really excited about doing performances that are, again, subverting tradition, right? So it's not going to be a flat stage that you stare at, right? A theater in the round like changes you as an audience member.
Absolutely.
You feel like more vulnerable, more part of it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that having that be my first experience at a young age really shaped my chasing of circles, because it like I said, it subverts the way you think about your interactivity with a performance, and that the audience is part of it too. Heck yeah.
The fact that
the feels.
The fact that the audience is just more connected in that environment, you know, I feel like that's really powerful.
You're going to be part of something rather than going to just passively consume it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It changes, well, the molecular environment, I think, at an atomic level.
Yeah.
And therefore what can happen. So yeah, it was really fun to talk to Patrick about the idea of like that adrenaline that you get from doing something for the first time and trying to recreate that through like improv happy accidents. I'm really vibing with that.
If we raid Sid, ask him about his Michael Jackson t-shirt.
Are you trying to like lure us into raiding Sid? Because now I'm like, I have to check that out.
Yeah, plus I'm
Let's
like, are you Sid's manager?
You might be.
You might be.
I believe it. But yeah, thank you all for being here for this really special conversation. And yeah, it's really always such a fun time, always so uplifting. Just continues to surprise and amaze. Thank you, Digital Meds, for the follow.
Same.
Welcome in.
Same, Wolf, same.
You can barely manage your life, yeah. I know. That's so funny. You're just such a good friend, Mr. X. Such a good stream friend.
Yeah. Well, we all love Sid here.
Well, I mean, now I feel like I can't not raid into Sid, but let's see.
We all know we all love Sid.
Sometimes there's, you know, like a shrimp thing going on that we want to raid into, but I don't think that's the case right now. Ooh, that's enticing. Let's see.
Ooh, we got
Basically,
Santana.
Mr. X was like, hey, I'm here. Can you end your stream now, please?
I know. Well, no, he would never say that, actually. Like,
no.
He would never promote the idea of ending a stream.
No, never. Just goad us into continuing. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that our next stream will be Saturday, and it will be a movie night, and I'm pretty sure that the movie that won last week is just kind of sitting there still winning. Because I didn't do a new poll this week. I just was like, well, we skipped. Well, that one won, so we have to do it. Hold on. Oh no, we've been chatting a lot in the movie channel on our Discord, and I can't find the poll. Yeah. The same one we were going to watch last week.
That was Jack throwing shade, in case you didn't detect that.
I was throwing shade?
Yeah, for people starting non-movie conversations in the movie.
They were all movie. That's what I was excited. It was the opposite of shade.
Well, thanks for clarifying.
It was like, woohoo! Like, I maybe would like to have even like more conversation in the movie chat. Because that's...
As long as it's about movies.
Movies or TV. It's really just sci-fi stuff in general.
Yeah.
Which
Sci-fi in
we'll save it
general,
for the
movies.
Saturdays. So Saturdays, Sci-Fi Saturdays, we watch a movie, and we have in our Discord where we vote. What is that? Oh, that was just our fan game. In our Discord, we vote on what movie we're going to watch, and we also, let you know when we're streaming and talk about gear and all kinds of things. Always doing new stuff in the Discord based on what people want to talk about. And if we want to start a channel for circles versus squares, I'm happy to do that. Circles versus squares, just like a daily poll. Do you feel more like a circle today or a square?
Oh, there's your TikTok idea.
That's my TikTok idea? Oh gosh. I don't know what that would even be. What would it just be me saying I feel like a circle today?
Yeah.
Oh,
or
it's like
square.
bones or no
yes,
bones.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally didn't pick up on that. There was this guy on TikTok who had a pug, a very old pug. And if he was able to take a walk that day, he called it a bones day, meaning he has all his bones, he's able to walk around. And that meant today's a bones day, you should get up and go live your life and go for it and do that thing you've been putting off. A lot of days were no bones days. No bones day meant that he couldn't even lift him up. He would just fall right back down.
The dog was in a pathetic mode.
The dog is no longer with us.
Right.
So Bones
R.I.P.
No Bones Day doesn't happen anymore, but it was a beautiful era. It was a beautiful time. And it was really cool to be like, I feel like it's a No Bones Day, and then go to his channel and be like, it is a No Bones Day. I'm going back to bed. This was also during the pandemic, too.
Give you an excuse to feel one way or the other.
So the idea of do you feel more like a circle or a square today, and letting everybody know it's a circle day and what that means versus a square day is what Gus is proposing.
No other good reason than you feel like
just because absurdism is probably, I feel like, the only way I can even handle doing any new form of social media outside of sharing music. Mm-hmm. If it's not going to be totally absurd, I'm just not really that interested in it, because life feels too absurd at the moment to really be taken seriously. But you don't want to make jokes. I'm not going to do a stand-up special about it because that hurts too much, because it is real. Things are crazy. Mm-hmm. But absurdism is the answer to that, I think. We can talk about that on Discord too.
Absurdism is the
Surrealism,
answer.
absurdism, that's my safe space that I would retreat into when you feel like life is confusing and you don't know how to feel about it and you don't want to get upset. So, as I ramble, obviously I know what we're about to do, and it involves...
We're about to... Bam, 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 bam. We're about to raid into Sid.
Just, can't go wrong. Mr. X is right. So we're going to raid into Sid now because he's such a fun friend to raid into. He's always up to something. And we're going to ask him about his Michael Jackson t-shirt. But before we do that, I just want to make sure that everybody knows to either jump into our Discord to find out about Patrick, or make sure you grabbed one of those links to follow Patrick on Instagram or Bandcamp or YouTube. I know you won't be disappointed. And we're just so happy that you all were here, and this was super, super fun. And thank you so much to everybody who recommended that we have Patrick on. And shout out to Dave Soto for introducing us.
You were right. It was
Thanks,
awesome.
Mr. X, for the recommendation. We'll see you guys on the other side, and see you on Saturday for maybe night.